Welcome to the Daily Wrap-Up, a concise show dedicated to bringing you the most relevant, independent news as we see it from the last 24 hours. Thursday, March 21st, 2024. Thank you for joining me today. We've been talking about the ceasefire conversation since the start of this post-October 7th section of the ongoing illegal occupation of Palestine, and the reality, rather the illusion around it all. And the frustrating dynamic of how the very entities that have, I mean, as far back as I can look, have argued that what they're doing in the world is fighting for freedom and equality and good things for people and human rights. And of course, today people are seeing, thank God, that that's been a lie. That these people are not genuine in what they're actually fighting for. At the very least, it's only opportunism. And so what we're seeing in regard to the ceasefire conversation is a very, very clear display of how they'll say a lot of things and then actively contradict that, like the image we used today, which was one of the earlier examples of them vetoing a ceasefire. Now, the game that really comes into play, which we'll discuss today, is in regard to this is why the term pause came up and people tried to bat it down. They want to use the term ceasefire. It's a temporary pause, or whatever you want to call it, in conflict is not a ceasefire. I mean, you could argue that it would apply, but historically, the way these terms are used, ceasefire is something that is agreed upon. Like, that's what they're discussing. The metrics that are met, and it's not for some 6-day, 2-week, 5-week. It's a long-term break based on an agreement that is not temporary. A ceasefire can end, obviously, but it's meant to be something that is ongoing, indefinite, and sort of in the mindset of leading to something more of a truce. What the U.S. government and Israel continue to do is call which in the beginning, a week, 2 weeks, now a 6-week argument of a pause, which they call a ceasefire. And this is intended to manipulate the people that don't know the inner workings. And though they can turn around and say Hamas yet again refuses a ceasefire. And no, what they actually did was offer the ceasefire from the first week forward for an entire exchange, which everybody's becoming aware of. And they offer a temporary in response. And then they say, well, that doesn't make any sense in any context, and nobody wants that. And they say Hamas refuses a ceasefire. And we've talked about this a lot. But again, we're going to get into a conversation about well, I think what really caught my attention, I was going to say that the newer arm, the current leg of this illusion, but that they're presenting another resolution to the United Nations, which we'll talk about, the United States, which is really insulting because on one hand, you got Israel saying the UN is Hamas. So we're pretending they're all going to work with Hamas to make this truce. It's all stupid. It's all narrative, and they'll say whatever they can at any moment to make it work the way they want it to. This is what dishonest people do. But to the fact that the United States is going to the United Nations and offering a resolution for a ceasefire, even though they've vetoed, I think, 4 or more ceasefires thus far. And it's an insulting game to be played when you're the only group outside of Israel that is actively pushing against what everybody else wants and then framing it to the average people watching the news, assuming they're still ridiculously watching corporate media and the one of the two sides they're presenting. And they'll tell you, well, they're discussing this and they're in their delegations, they're in their conversations, they're debating, their diplomats are doing their job. It's not what's happening. It's really frustrating. And of course, this main point really shows you the true nature of who we're dealing with. And the fact that they're willing to allow these children to continue to starve. They're willing to allow these women and elderly and everybody else and innocent people continue to be killed and suffer unfathomably. Like we can't even truly understand what they're going through as people in the Western world. We just don't understand this in most cases, because I'm sure there's examples of people that have. But the point being that it's beyond our understanding because of the lies we've lived for so long. And I'm not talking about just suffering and pain and I mean, even reality of what starvation truly is versus being hungry. But I mean, like, not just a day of that or a week of that, but we're talking this ongoing 75-year apartheid occupation, brutal action into a 5-month extreme version of that. That is what they're actually dealing with. And this ceasefire only shows you that they don't care about any of that and are willing to make you feel guilty for not pretending like there's only one thing that's been happening and it was only this one day. I just can't believe anybody ever fell for that. But we're also going to, from that point, continue to talk about Al-Shifa Hospital and how this one example continues to show you what they're allowing to continue to happen while they're pretending they're working some kind of deal out when it's only the last holdout making sure this continues. And the U.S. being seemingly the sole complicit party in allowing that to happen, knowing they have the sole power to actually stop this if they truly wanted to. Seeing as how we as the American people, by and large, left and right, truly want that to happen, let's just acknowledge yet again that we don't live in some fantasy where they do exactly what the majority wants in this country, even if that's what we actually should want, mob rule. And we're just so many classically held beliefs are seemingly crumbling, and thank God. I think this is a positive moment if we can truly capitalize on it. But the Al-Shifa hospital discussion is really hard to, it is a vivid and real-time example of just mass execution. And we've been highlighting this from the beginning, and we're not talking about even in the context of possible Hamas overlaps. We're talking about willful executions of Palestinian civilians. That is what has been happening from the very beginning. And I think, even corporate media, even levels of the human rights groups that have been calling this out from the beginning are finally, going as far as they should be going and making these kind of allegations and saying that they're not just happening, but that they're responsible for it. We know it's happening. I'll make a point about that, the language they use today in a general sense about why they say sometimes may be responsible for and things like that. Now, we're also going to get into an important point around the funding and the lies, of course, the famine conversation. I can't, this is one that to me is very central to the moment, because the famine aspect of this is really hard for me to accept. Like any of it's acceptable, but the point being that we actually could do something about this. There is enough pressure that even other countries could apply to make this stop. And seemingly there's not enough pushback to allow this to stop. And I mean, just which we'll go over yet again with more information, by the way, more and more damning information about everybody everywhere other than the U.S. and Israel seemingly calling out that they're blocking the aid, that they know they're doing this, they're relentlessly starving people who are already on the brink of extreme starvation into famine and are now a level 5 or category 5, I forget the term they use, from I think it's the IPC. One of the main groups that actually deals with this is now given it its highest level of what they're dealing with. And alternatively, you've got the Israeli government going, there's not a famine. There's nothing wrong. And this is where this is what is so disconcerting for people. Even especially those that are still kind of unaware of the big picture, going like, how can they possibly be saying that? Like, again, it might even draw them to make questions about, and you should question whether the IPC group might be lying. Question everything, except when you take a time to look into it, the evidence is overwhelmingly obvious. But my point is, people are just at a loss. And we're going to go into that famine conversation and how it overlaps with the deliberate action of the IDF on the ground, the settlers in the West Bank, or the IDF in the West Bank, and the continued action that is deliberate, meant to starve, meant to torture, meant to make people suffer. I mean, it continues to baffle me how obviously on display this really is, and continues to show us this is one point I'll make today more than once. We need to make a note of the people who are making it clear that they don't care about what's going on, or are in some magical way completely incapable of actually grasping what's happening. And I give that as a small caveat. I don't think that's even very likely. I don't find it. I see it very near impossible that somebody could stand back and, even with the gleaning the corporate conversation, not see what's going on. I find that near impossible, but I will give the opening small one for people that are just that stupid or that willfully ignorant. Maybe it's possible, but I'm telling you, make a note of the people who are letting this continue, who are shouting you down, telling you that you're denying bad things by pointing back at one day 5 months ago and ignoring everything that's continuing to happen. Despite the fact that we know that you have called out what happened on that day. It's just that they want you to do it every day since and not look at what's going on right now. It's just horrifying to me. And we're going to end with a conversation about some more atrocity propaganda. And I want to make another point about the pier again to end. I'm going to go over that video again. I want to make some points about this and really highlight what she was saying yesterday. And if you haven't seen it, it's an important clip. I mean, it's a lot of the points that I was already making. This is just another way for occupation. This is another way for a sort of another regime change kind of a tactic, removing UNRWA, putting their own people in place under a guise that it's for the best interest. It's horrifying. And it's just one more action in the degradation of what is and was Palestine. Now let's start I just want to make sure you guys didn't miss the show from yesterday for no other reason than it's really fantastic to see this person get fired from his job because he's a horrible monster of a human being, and human being is being very kind. Elon Levy was suspended, if you didn't see that yesterday. And yes, it was for lying about food aid. Now, the pressure and why it happened, I doubt, was because they're like, aghast, you lied about food aid. It's because he lied about food aid in contradiction, in doing so, contradicted David Cameron. And then the UK kind of pushed back from their positions. I think it was Alison Kern, I think was her name. And the point was that for whatever reason, something happened there, and that made the conversation become bigger. And it was the point was really coming down to, and you can read the article, that he was disagreeing that aid was needed. So I don't know what else you call that than him doing what he's been doing for months, which is lying about delivering food aid. And he got called out by the UK government, and then he got removed from his job. Now, I'm willing to bet you he's probably going to get put back in some other context, or maybe this same position when this goes away, because they're not mad with his lying. He's doing his job for them. This is probably just about appeasing the masses. Or who knows? Because we don't really know the full back and forth between them in the background. But apparently there's a change.org petition up for signing signatures to get him back in his position, whatever. The point to take from this, though, and this will flavor the opening point and the famine point today in general, the couple points on the show, is that he lied. We can prove that he lied. And now even at the highest levels of the conversation, he's getting pushback because he's making them look stupid, or rather making, that may be how they perceived it. And so all it really shows you is they all really don't care if he lies, but to the right angles, the right people, you can't contradict what we're saying. You can't pretend that we are not the one. We know what you're doing. So we're trying to appease our people over here. And if you come and step in our conversation and say, no, actually, you're wrong, we are giving aid, suddenly this happens. So I just think it's, we're watching these kind of ebbing and flowing of power dynamics and structures that, I think things are shifting. And that's why my point is that we need to take advantage of this and shift it in the way that we want as the people, which is probably never happened ever. But either way, we should try. I think what we're seeing, though, is this kind of shifting back and forth, and this person is kind of the scapegoat. That's what happens when you're one of these lackeys like this guy here, who just do the dirty work and stand up every day, all day, and lie and gaslight for genocide and help starve children. They don't care about you. You're the guy that gets thrown under the bus, like we've seen many, many, many times. But anyway, just let's all take a little bit of a positive note and enjoy the fact that this person got a little bit of what he deserved, even if it was just a fraction. Because now people are calling him out online. See, you're lying. We knew you were lying. And I'm sure he hates that, which gives me pleasure. Now, here is a point I want to start with, just to show you that it's not just unique to sociopaths like Elon Levy. It's crazy to me that this is, like, at the very least, I mean, I've attacked probably a harsh word. I mean, you can call it that. I've criticized KJP many times because I genuinely think that she's easily the worst person I've ever seen in this position. You could debate that, but top two. And it's clear. They put her in the position, and they even stated that because of her diversity, which is, by the way, insulting to anybody with a brain, because why would we want somebody in a position that is not the best person for the position? Now, even if you pretend that she was in the top 5 and you chose her instead of the top 1 because of the diversity, and she's still good at the job, first of all, she's not, and we can all see that. But the point to make is that why is diversity even in the conversation if it's about who is the best at the job? Isn't that in itself racist? Yes, it is, because you're now making choices based on race, not on merit, and that is racism. But regardless, the point is that she's bad, just so I can make that point. And my point in all of that is to say that even then you can see that she's really struggling. Well, I shouldn't say even then. I mean, it probably makes it even more difficult, but she's struggling. And I can see it on her face. Now, you can either tell me that I would either frame this as she is so over this job. She kind of is like going through the motions. And that may be the case. And that's what some people are arguing. But I kind of feel like this is just that they don't care, that they're so tired of having to pretend like they care about the things that they need to make you think they care about, that it's just exhausting. So there's 2 points to either that she is a person with feelings and she's having a hard time, which that may be the case. Some of these people really, you can see it is wears on them. Their eyes sink in. I've shown you that with that blonde one from last time. Or they're a sociopath and they get tired with having to pretend that they care. That's my opinion. Anyway, let's watch this clip. As Diab Abu Jaija says, look at how this creature is rolling its eyes and acting blasé toward the massacre of thousands of children, women, and men. Now, there's nobody who can honestly, other than Israel, which again, it's laughably stupid how everybody, including their allies and everybody at every angle. I mean, I was saying that early in this conversation, like, everybody, and there were some holdouts, but you have to realize at this point, it is everybody. I mean, every human rights group, every international body, even the United States. Now, they may not be as hard as some of the other groups, but even Blinken and Biden are like, yeah, you got to kind of pull back, kill less children, put a little more aid in there. So they've lost control of that. My point, though, is that there's nobody that argues that there's not a massacre happening. At best, you've got the argument from Israel that is, well, Hamas is responsible, which is a hard sell, seeing as how you've just been relentlessly killing people and there's nobody else bombing into Gaza. So as much as you want to scream that human shield argument, first of all, despite the fact that there's overwhelming evidence that Israel does that as a matter of policy, and we've proven that probably 3 times just since October 7th, not even getting into the historical documentation from the UN and the neighbor procedure, which is literally a human shield program. But the fact that they have yet to prove one example of that, even the one they did put out where they go, see, we caught him right there in the hospital. Oops. A fact check came around and said, sorry, that was in the other property. And we can prove that with this line. They weren't even near the hospital. But it doesn't matter. My point is always that if they have to lie about those things, it's pretty clear they don't have the evidence. Otherwise, it would be in your face every day. So when they're rolling their eyes or acting blasé about something that is roundly acknowledged, that there are women, children, and men that are suffering, there's no reason you should act like it doesn't matter whether or not it's Hamas doing that or whether or not it's Israel. It happens. So watch the way she responds and just realize these are the people that are pretending that they're the heroes of the world. And as I said, watch this clumsy, repetitive, and apathetic response to the question of why no one in the Palestinian community wants to meet with the White House. I think you know why. I said you'd be forgiven for thinking the question was about October 7th, 5 months ago. Watch this and tell me it's not plain as day what's actually happening here.
We have Palestinian American, Arab American, and Muslim organizations that the White House reached out to for a meeting this week rejected the invitation. So what is the White House strategy on this? And are there plans for the president to directly engage with these communities?
So the first point, obviously, look at the way that look at her face, guys. She's like, oh, here we go. Do we have to care about these children again? It's just gross. I mean, and this is all over everyone's talking about this today for some reason. This is just everyone's attack because this deserves to be called out. It's just disgusting to act like this doesn't matter or act like this is a tired conversation or whatever she's relaying right there. But the crazier part is what she actually goes into right away. Now, the question is about, these Palestinians and, why you're not, let me replay the last
strategy on this. And are there plans for the president to directly engage with these communities?
Right. The communities that, that they invited and they just didn't want to deal with the White House. So what I first think about this, which is hilarious, is I have to point this out. The response itself is ridiculous, but just note this is my point about how bad she is at this, and I just can't help myself. The first section, listen to what she says, and ask yourself how it makes any sense other than just filler, which she does every single time. Like literally every time. Well, we've talked to the president about it's just the same cycle, and then all of a sudden you notice that she kind of catches what she wants to say, and then she rattles off real quickly and jumps into the point. And in this case, it's really bad because it doesn't even make sense to the overall point. But then she goes into, well, October 7th was bad, and then people died on October 7th, and we care about October 7th. Yeah, and then Palestine too. Like that's basically her answer to why you don't want to deal with Palestinians, why they don't want to deal with you, and whether you're going to reach out to them again. Your answer is October 7th was bad? How does that even line? I think this was like a short circuit for her. That her response was just like calling on whatever talking point, bullet point she could grab because she didn't know what to say. I don't know. You tell me what you think.
Organizations that the White House reached out to for a meeting this week rejected the invitation. So what is the White House strategy on this? And are there plans for the president to directly engage with these communities?
So look, the president, as you know, has had an opportunity to meet with members of that community.
Yeah, she just said that, sweetheart. She just said that. I shouldn't believe it. She just said that. She just said, this is what happened, and they refused. What are you going to do about that? As you know, the president has been meeting with these people. Flip, flip, flip. What am I going to say? As you know, and then as we've clearly discussed, we met with it's every time. I don't know why it bothers me so much, but it's like we are living in a world where this is what we're seeing. This is supposed to be the intelligent, highest level of the conversation. These people are ridiculous. She's ridiculous. Sorry, I'll let it play.
With these communities.
So, look, the president, as you know, has had an opportunity to meet with members of that community not too long ago.
Yep.
Leaders of that community, the
Yep.
Arab American community,
Yep.
the Muslim American community, not
Yep.
too long ago.
Yep.
And so,
Yep.
look, what I
There
will
we
say
go.
is we
Now we're
understand
into
that
it.
this is a difficult time, that this is a painful time.
Still nonsense.
We understand that the events of October 7th that killed more than 1,200 souls, right?
Nope, it was actually 1,100 now. The rest of them were shown to be Hamas members that are either their own people that they killed, right? I mean, or excuse me, the Hamas members that they killed while next to their own people. Sorry, I said I wasn't going to stop it. But they keep saying that. Over 1,200, mostly civilians? No, in fact, it was less than 1,200, half of them not civilians. That was proven right in the beginning. But in any case, what does this have to do with meeting Palestinians? Why is it your diatribe is October 7th was bad, people suffered on that day, when you're asking about why you're not meeting with Palestinians? I genuinely think she kind of had a short circuit.
Took more than 1,200 souls in Israel, and also took Hamas, the terrorist organization, also, as we know, took hostage more than 200 people. And what that led to, that war that led to, is incredibly painful.
And that's it. That's the point. So talk about brushing over the point. All that led to the thing over here in Palestine. Like, remember when Elon Omar was like, and 9/11 and some things happened and whatever she said, when in reality, all she was really doing was just kind of brushing over, not trying to belittle. I mean, who knows? Maybe she was trying to belittle it. But what I took from it was she was kind of just going like, and then what we all know happened. But either way, people lost their minds about that. And she's like, and some things happened over here. That's what she thinks about 9/11. I mean, just think about how ridiculous this is. You're talking about Palestinian communities, and your answer is October 7th, people died, they kidnapped people, Hamas is bad, they're in Gaza, and then, the war is terrible. It's just so
we
bad.
Understand that. And so, look, we're going to continue to, as you know,
That was really
President,
That was it.
Senior officials from the White House met with members of those communities.
Yeah, you already said that. That's what she said when she framed the question.
In Illinois just yesterday, and we're going to continue to have those regular meetings to hear directly from them, and the president believes that's important to do.
Wow.
To hear it from those voices.
Okay, I'm done making fun. I mean, am I crazy, or is this like the most ridiculous thing? It's just, it's just on display for the world. Because, the game is pretending like this isn't cartoonish, like that she isn't just a mumbling fool that doesn't answer any question, and she's flipping through talking points and she's just reciting the thing she said. I mean, I don't know. It's really hard for me to pretend like any of this should be taken seriously, which I don't think we do. But this is in the context of like how maybe a normie person would kind of have a conversation. I can't just come over the top with like nothing's real and these people are all fake, because they won't want to engage in that conversation. My point is, at some level, you have to kind of engage at the political level, like the election conversation, to get people to realize how fake these things are. But my God, it's just sad, isn't it? Now, Arnaud Bertrand called the same thing out, saying, unreal. The government she represents is currently sponsoring a genocide, and she reacts like a bored Walmart employee handling a customer complaint when questioned about it. Exactly. Now, my point in general, after having a little bit of fun making fun of KGP, is that ultimately this is the kind of person, the people that we're dealing with, the mindset rather, whether that's a Zionist influence or people that are compromised by that or don't recognize why there's a more. The point is that they are actively ignoring what we all see. They're actively not just ignoring, but gaslighting, obfuscating. In fact, again, the point they keep making, claiming the exact diametric opposite. No, there's not a famine. There's food everywhere. That kind of ridiculousness. It's all over Twitter. I said, and this is David Collier, one of the people we pointed out in the past, just rabidly fighting for everything Israel says. These are the kind of people that will share what Israel posts, even though Israel just posts text on Twitter with nothing to back it up. They'll quote that and share it and say, this happened today. I'm sure a lot of people on Twitter do that, but realize that doesn't make them valid sources of information. They're just regurgitating what the source they like said. That's not news. That's not journalism. That's just you're just regurgitating. Right. So when we share something, the same thing. If you don't see a source link, which is rarely the case, then assume that I haven't proven that, even though you should know that I rarely would ever post something without proving it. But you shouldn't assume that. Always do your due diligence. My point is, with these kind of people, you can prove that they've done this with things that we later prove are false. He says, for the 1,000th time, there is no genocide and no famine. Guys, this is March 20th. This was yesterday. He says there's just a bunch of Hamas supporters wearing press jackets and lots of Western politicians and journalists who have completely lost their way. Think about trying to make this argument with everything we can see, with the World Court, with every international group, with every human rights group, with all of their allies, with every bit of evidence we can see. Are you pretending that these press jacket Hamas wearers are they all deep fake videos? Like, what are you actually arguing right there? We've seen this. Now, you can argue that it doesn't represent the real picture, that it's bigger or smaller, but how can you say no famine, no genocide? People, I mean, the group that is, which we'll get into, that its job is to argue or to, rate what they're seeing and dealing with, not whether who's responsible, but just, yeah, we can see that it's happening, and it's a level 5, the highest level. It says there, he goes on, there is just a bunch of Hamas supporters wearing press jackets. He says Israel is fighting genocidal Islamic terrorists. Let us all hope Israel wins. That's really what he said. And if you just, scroll, there's horrible pictures down here. Another image of a child whose face was burned off by whatever God knows they're using, white phosphorus or whatever else. It's all over the place, guys. It's horrible. There's a bunch of them down there. And this is the phase they're listing right here. Now, we're going to get into some pretty rough numbers about this when we get into the numbers and the amount of people that are starving, and it's just horrifying. Alon Mizrahi says today, I'm convinced, and I really like this. It's a little bit of a longer post, but I really like just the stating of it. This probably won't convince people that are invested in the other argument, but my point is you could prove all of this. And quite frankly, we have proven all this on this show. He says, I'm convinced there isn't a face on earth more suitable to be the presenter of what can be aptly called the demonic infantilism, acting like an infant, of this genocide. So it's just a term he decided to use, demonic is it infantilism? Infantilism? But it basically says that by this term, I mean not only the almost mindless, banal, evil, banal. That's funny. Some of these words that you never use and you ever say out loud, then you get to it, and you're like, the point is that these are just trying to think of the words that I regularly use about this. Not just mindless, but, it goes into the level of like psychotic. So, there's a difference between sociopathic and psychopathy and sociopathy, but they're very similar. And my mindset is these are people like he's discussing here that are just, it's almost like it's like we just discussed with the KJP, like she doesn't even care. Like, it's almost like she's yawning while she's obfuscating people starving to death. It is really like, this is why I actually used the word evil on the last show. The same thing I talked about with Michael Yeadon, a scientist who, after the conversation of the COVID-19 illusion, was like, look, I don't know what else to call this but evil. Like, we're beginning to see these things from a real level, a core level. And it's not just foreign policy. It's not just big pharma. Like, there are people in control of a lot today, not necessarily everything all the time, but definitely influencing, if not controlling, damn near everything that goes on. And we're seeing these strings begin to at least be seen. And that's the kind of thing we're highlighting here, just like with this. And it is very evil. It's mindless, banal. Let me let you do this real quick. Banal. Yeah, so I had it right. I feel like it would be said differently, though. In any case, banal, evil, being performed and inflicted with a kind of tedious boredom, that's where I was going with that. Like a troubled kid setting his 100th cat on fire, which I love. Now, it's just horrible, but I mean, like the analogy. Perfect. You're like this little sociopathic monster kid that's pulling wings off of flies and hurting animals, and you're just bored with it. It says, I also mean the fatal absurdity of trying to force the whole world to deny what we know is true and accept what is demonstrably obviously false. And he says, because, and these are things that we have proven. Everybody knows Israel was humiliated militarily on October 7th. Now, I would only add the caveat that I actually do think that there's a part. And if I had to bet today, where I would leave with this, and I'm sure more information will come. I'm hoping there's some in-depth people on the ground that will end up really breaking some new stuff. But that ultimately, I think it's clear that some level of the Israeli government, if not all of it, allowed what happened. Knew it was coming, allowed what happened. In a 9/11 sense, trust me, it's not actually in the argument that this was their 9/11 is more on the nose than you realize. And I think that's almost why this was put forward, because they're both the same kind of situation. There was some level that was involved and allowed these things to happen. Now, my opinion would be that there's also levels of their government that didn't necessarily know, or rather was willfully ignorant about it. But that's just my opinion. But we can prove there was all sorts of things that they did know about. Now, by the way, I forgot to bring this up in the beginning. I mentioned yesterday that I was going to watch this documentary today. The reason I put it off, and I wish I would have said this at the beginning, yesterday, this new browser that we're working with, I lost some links that I had, and I'm not sure what happened. Somebody sent me a documentary by a guy named John something. I downloaded it, thank God, and I'm going to play it and watch it tomorrow, either way, most likely tomorrow, next show for sure. But I would love to be able to give him credit because it was a small channel and I wouldn't recognize it. So if you're out there and you were the one that sent it to me, maybe it's Orwell for all I know, let me know who it was so I can make sure I give him a shout out, because this documentary it's a smaller personal made thing, but I really like the way it was done. So we're going to get into that in the next show, and it will overlap with some of the points I'm going to make today, but I wanted to push it off because I wanted to be able to give this guy credit, because I do think it's important, and I could do it after the fact, but I'm going to give it till tomorrow. So if you know what that was, reach out. I don't even know the title because I just downloaded it and I don't have that. So I'm actually, maybe it's on the actual video. I should look. But in any case, we will be talking about that. Now back to this point, because that's what brought it to my mind, is the idea about the October 7th points. And I think he gets into some interesting points about the gun towers and stuff that I hadn't really talked about, that I think it's self-evident, guys. It's self-evident. There's no way that this happened without some level of acknowledgement. So that fact has been so aggressively skipped over by almost all the independent media too is pretty crazy. Not that, no, many of us have continued to point at it, but you'd think that would be a much bigger highlight right now. Now, he says that they were humiliated October 7th by Hamas. He says, and he's being facetious here, whose fighters took the time to gang rape corpses, as some pro-genociders would have you believe, which immediately makes you think that a Hamas that refrains from gang raping corpses would conquer the entirety of Israel with ease. Think about the point he's making. So you're telling us that they successfully carried out one of the most successful, I guess, in incursions into or attacks on Israel in history by Gaza, successfully invaded, all the stuff that happened, hours go by. His point is, well, gee, if they weren't gang raping corpses all over the ground, they would have taken the whole area. Good thing they didn't focus on actually taking over I mean, are we serious about that? Like, it's such a ridiculous claim in the first place. No evidence whatsoever. There's no evidence. There's no proof that they were raping anybody, first of all. Secondarily, that they were raping corpses or children or whatever else they're claiming now. It's just pushing the envelope of the atrocity propaganda. Why? Well, because they've been screaming crazy things since the beginning, and now people are getting tired of it. Well, they got to push that envelope. They got to keep outraging you a little bit more. I'm willing to bet you it gets even more ridiculous. New things show us that they did this too. Get ready for Herzog coming out again. But he goes on to say, everybody knows that this campaign is a terrible disaster for Israel's image, which is forever and irrevocably destroyed in the eyes of billions of people. Like, just let that sink in, the reality of that. There's no way you come back from that. Even if every government in the world keeps saying the same thing, if we all have come to opinions that we can prove, eventually those governments, which, by the way, we're already seeing, are going to start to walk on our side because they need your support. They need Israel's support too. But if it comes down to choosing, they need your support before they need a foreign country's support in the context of controlling their country, which is you. But it says everybody knows this is not a war, but a punitive mass slaughter meant to instill a kind of historical horror that is supposed to somehow make Palestinians forget they deserve a homeland. This is the whole UNRWA point. And is also supposed to make Israel a triumphant and moral mini-empire, both unattainable and idiotic causes. Everybody knows Israel is an expansionist entity, especially in its current ultra-religious and mega-nationalist form, which, by the way, so is Britain, so is the United States. This is exactly the same concept. At least, for the most part, Britain and the United States are colonial powers. You could argue that the United States has been the one that has really, truly, right up until this day, continued that colonial mindset under the guise of fighting for freedom. Not so much Britain today, but the point is, historically, it goes long back before even the creation of the United States. But it says, everybody knows none of this would have been possible without American power being fully on the side of Israel. Everybody knows what Israel is doing is against all sense of morality and humanity. Everybody knows civilians have been and are attacked mercilessly, starved, denied medical care, sniped, and put under the most extreme psychological and physical forms of torture known to humanity. Everybody knows Israeli society is in deep, deep trouble and has lost contact with reality. Everybody knows Netanyahu is a psychopath who will be remembered as one of the greatest monsters in history. Everybody knows no other ethnic group could enforce such a total genocide obedience in the West except Israelis. He says, I could go on, but the message is clear. The common truths I have laid out here are understood to be so by the vast majority of people who have paid any attention. But in the name of the truly demonic infantilism, both Israel and the U.S. continue to pursue their morally bankrupt and anti-human strategy of just killing more and more Palestinians without any explicable strategy, without any sense, in plain sight of the whole world. And one more question about Jared Kushner. Apart from being indigenous to Palestine and therefore entitled to ethnically cleanse it from non-Jews, or is he also an American native? And he says, this is so confusing. Some people act like they are indigenous everywhere, while others have nowhere to be indigenous. Just imagine what it means to be a Palestinian and having to deal with not only with Israel, but also with the likes of the world's Jared Kushners. Don't forget, he just said, Gaza's waterfront property could be very valuable. And when asked about the Palestinians and their rights, he's like, well, there's not much of Gaza left anyway. Well, yeah, who did that? And why is that happening? Let's just brush over the war crime that you pretended wasn't happening until now you're there, so too late. That's Zionism for you right there. Now, here's an interesting side point, just to show you this in Congress. And what's interesting is never take this as me arguing that one person is on the right side and good. That's never like that. I honestly think most of these people would just say whatever they need to say in order to get you to think what they're doing is right for their own interests. And sometimes that aligns with what you do think is right. My point is, this is the outside the office of Rashida Tlaib, who, by the way, is Palestinian. And this person says, why does U.S. Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib have the flag of Palestine and not the American one? Says if she works for Palestine, not Americans, she should go to Gaza, not Capitol Hill. Now, this is only because right now, Americans, the blind, mindless, ignorant following Americans out there that just go after whatever they're told to go after that day. I hate the current thing. I support the current thing. That's just how it is right now. And it's always been that way for a long time. Whether it's Russia or China or whatever your two-party side is telling you to be outraged about that day. The point is that this is exactly the point I made in reverse when we talked about this. Oh, yeah. Remember that? Florida congressman wears an IDF uniform. Why? Because he's a member of the IDF. Okay. So they didn't seem to care about that. Oh, that's because you're pro-Israel. Okay. That doesn't. But see, the difference is very clear. Now, it's not just the reverse point to say I care about one and not the other. The point that I made before this flag point came up was, okay, well, there's a big difference between an American politician holding a flag in support of another country, which happens all the time, especially with Israeli flags, but in general, especially, by the way, if you are Palestinian. So it certainly should not be a problem for you to have the flag that your ethnicity is or where you come from. And quite frankly, I don't even know if does every one of these people have an American flag right out front of their office? I don't know. But in any case, the point is it should not be that outside the realm of what normally happens to have them support their nationality. Just like you can see right now, plenty of politicians with just Israeli flags. My point is, it's very clearly different that you have an American politician who's literally in a foreign military, a foreign government's military. Why is that not a problem? Would you care if he was in the Chinese military? Well, clearly. Why is it different? It shouldn't be. It's the same issue. Now ask yourself, do you see any Americans in the British Army? Do you see any British military in the U.S.? Or do you see, or rather, British politicians, the American? No, because that's weird. Why isn't it weird that it's an Israeli thing? So back to the point, it's really ridiculous that you would call out this and not have any concern about your government being in a foreign military. So this, to me, is just about trying to outrage about, you're trying to downplay anything that's pro-Israel and upplay anything pro-Palestine as racist, terrorism, whatever else. I just find that ridiculous. That's none of that's to say that I think Rashida Tlaib cares about your freedom. Now, here's another point about this kind of same conversation and how they are, as in the sense of like the Zionist pro-Israel conversation, it just isn't a desperate down, spiral, down spiral, or how do you say that? Desperate, or spiral, down spiral? How do you say that? In any case, they're spiraling down and just kind of lashing out, including against their allies like the United States. Or in this case, we have an example of Jonathan Glazer, who spoke up at this recent award ceremony, and you remember, and basically just called this out and said, look, you know, and they tried to make it about how he's like denouncing Jews in general. It's not really what he said. Basically, I mean, look, it's got the subtitles. He says right here, basically what he says is, and by the way, he made a film about the Holocaust. He says our film shows where dehumanization leads at its worst. And he's referencing what Israel's doing today. That's the whole point. It shaped all of our past and our present. He says, right now, we stand here as men who refute their Jewishness and the Holocaust being hijacked. Now, he didn't say he refutes being Jewish. He refutes people hijacking his Jewishness and the Holocaust. How do we, I mean, this is such an embarrassing conflation by the very people that he's calling out. They go, you, how dare you? You're not Jewish when you say that. And you're literally making his point for him. He's refuting the fact that Zionism is hijacking Judaism. Guys, this is on a main stage. What is this, the Grammys or whatever it was? I don't even care about these award shows. The point is that this is on a high level, like in the sense of like mainstream stage. And he got up there and said what I'm saying. Didn't say Zionism, but made the point that people somewhere are hijacking the idea of Judaism. Can you imagine seeing that like a year ago? I just think that's crazy. Now, my point is that came out and jewishfaculty.ca. It's a Jewish faculty in Canada against the adoption of this working definition of anti-Semitism. Basically, a group of Jewish people that realize anti-Semitism being weaponized. And they'd say Jonathan Glazer honors our ancestors with his speech in memory and dedication to all survivors of genocide, including Palestinians in Gaza. And that's what angers all the rabid Zionists. And that's why they say, you're not Jewish if you dare to care about human life that's not Jewish, or rather specifically Zionist Jewish, because they attack Jews all over the place who aren't Zionist. That's the whole point about the Torah Judaism group that calls out the IDF, calls out Zionism, calls out the state of Israel, and they get beat up on a regular basis by the IDF in Israel. By the way, elsewhere in the world too. But he goes, and those who resist complacency, but they write, at the time of rising attention to the diversity of Jewish voices. So that's important, right? And the point is that there's a huge movement of people that are finally recognizing this. Mark my words, guys. I'm beginning to think at least flirting with the majority of just average Jews in the world who recognize that they don't identify with the state of Israel, or that they don't believe that they are Zionists, or the Zionism represents their religion, right? Judaism is a religion. It is not an ethnicity. The state of Israel would make you an Israeli, not a Jewish person. So this game that's played is always about conflating the two in order to manipulate people who don't know any better. So you make arguments like this. So this guy says, the Palestinian poll, which, by the way, I don't know how you pretend you can get a poll from Palestine, which, by the way, would mean West Bank and Gaza, which would, by the way, be a completely different. I mean, how do you even pretend that you can do a poll in an area that's besieged by the Israeli military, who's being bombed and attacked? And so really that probably means they did a very limited poll in the West Bank, which is not limited to just Palestinians. In any case, I don't take this at face value. But that's not to say that I disagree with even the stats. But my point would be, let's make sure we realize there's no way this can be completely accurate. But the point is, he says 71% say 10/7 attacks were correct. Now, again, this is the kind of point that we get into where all you're doing is acknowledging a static, objective reality that when you're occupied, which no matter how much they scream about it, is a provable fact that goes back to any organization, international, otherwise, they are an occupied territory. And the truth is, as I just showed you in that 78 document from the UN, it's all Palestine. And even the UN has always said that. They just don't really lean into it today. Or you just want to talk about Gaza. Either way, it's all occupied. So that means they have a legal right to armed rebellion or armed resistance, which he mentions down here, or armed struggle is another way you can say it. All of which are referenced in different ways around the Fourth Geneva Convention. If you're an occupied territory, you have the right to armed resistance, armed struggle, which means you can pick up a gun and fight against the current occupying power, not civilians, but the military power that is oppressing you. Now, the reason that they're so desperate to keep this from your view is that this is a much bigger implication than just because of Israel or Gaza. It also overlaps with, I don't know, the illegal occupation of Syria, the illegal occupation of Iraq, the illegal occupation of Afghanistan, the illegal occupation of on and on and on and on. And that means that those countries have a right to fight and kill, the U.S. military. That's not what I want. That's not what anybody should want. That's what your government is making happen by being the illegal occupier. They are the bad guy in that situation. It doesn't matter what you say they're doing it for. You are breaking the law and just flout it, don't care. And so that means when these groups in Iraq decide to fight back after they were bombed, after they claimed they were Iran, but even though they're not, that's a legal act, but they call it terrorism. It's the same stupid thing here. So when they say 71% say the attacks were correct, well, that's 71% people that understand international law better than you. That may not be why they think that. Maybe some of them think it's because they hate Israeli people or hate Jews. I don't know. But regardless, it ultimately is correct because it was a legally protected act, not the civilians that were taken or the ones that might have been killed by Hamas if we end up proving that. But the act was. It's important, as I said before, about the U.S. military. If you want to pretend that crimes committed after the act of invasion then somehow delegitimize the entire war, well, then there's literally no legitimate war the U.S. has ever waged, or Israel for that matter, which, by the way, is actually something we should talk about. But nonetheless, it has to be equal. So if you're going to pretend the Iraq war is still justified despite all the rapes and murders and theft, well, then this is the same conversation. Far, far, far less problematic. 91% say Hamas committed no war crimes. Well, okay, that's a really... How would anybody know for sure at this point? We have overwhelming evidence of the IDF killing their own people, both in Gaza and on October 7th. I mean, it's pretty much the most obvious part of this whole conversation. And weirdly, some of the most kind of ignored. So my point would be, there's obvious reason to at least doubt who shot who. On top of that, they clearly are invested in the idea of their own self-determination, which they should be. So they're probably just going to side with the person that fought for their freedom, or however you want to see that. So simply saying that they just committed no war crimes, well, that's their opinion. They don't know any better than anybody else because they weren't there. But it says 59% say Hamas should control Gaza after the war is over. Now, how do we pretend that makes sense? Who are you asking? Who are you actually talking to? Not people in Gaza, which would be the real discussion. Or how about the fact that the Hamas leadership, who is funded and armed, because that is the truth, by Israel, and even the Qatar leadership that they're protecting, that literally they just discussed for taking over with Qatar the control of this port they're building. And now they're the ones saying that it's a problem that they want Hamas, that even though that's being shoehorned back in, even from Israel's side, I don't know how it's going to end up, but either way, it's incongruent. Now, it says Hamas has doubled the popular support of Fatah, the main party of the Palestinian Authority. But realize they say that's also a terrorist group, the Israeli government. And that's because there's no group that exists there that they don't call a terrorist group. So they've manufactured the reality, which, by the way, is the point about Haaretz saying that they funded Hamas and Fatah in West Bank and Gaza to make sure that they were never allowed a two-state solution while pretending that's what they wanted. It's all public. So when they say that, it's because they made sure that every group you could point to what they call terrorism. So they just are never, they can always pretend it's their fault for being terrorist, that they don't get what they deserve, which is the right of return and they're at least that two-state solution. And then he says, finally, armed struggle, not negotiations or nonviolent resistance. Of course, because nonviolent resistance is met with violent resistance by the Israeli government, right? Or the BDS movement is also called terrorism because you don't allow that. So either way, it doesn't even matter because they shouldn't have to rely on that because they have a legal right to armed resistance. And he says, is the most popular strategy to end the occupation. You know why? Because it's legal. But of course, the right point is that this is what Zachary Foster points out. He says, by comparison, 60% of Jewish Israelis support starving to death all 2.3 million Palestinians in Gaza, and 95% of Jewish Israelis are pro-genocide. And that poll, ladies and gentlemen, is easy to verify, seeing as how this is something that is widely discussed. Abby Martin's work goes back as far as you want to look. Now, specifically, 2 points to make. And when I say Abby Martin, like she's gone there and spoken to them on the ground, and they'll tell you this stuff. But 2 points to make. One, we're talking about specifically Jewish Israelis, and it's not just Jewish people in Israel, but the point being that 60% support starving them to death. I just want to make sure we understand that it's not all Jewish people, not all Israelis, not even all. It just means that there's a huge Zionist influence on that population. That's how we have to remember that. Don't broad stroke any group, even if it's very, very clearly the vast majority. That's just important. We have to be better than them in the sense of anybody trying to broad stroke others. But he says here, by the way, make sure you check out his Palestine Nexus website. It's really well done. I'm going to grab, see if this pops up. interview with him. Zachary Foster is a PhD from Princeton, and it's on the history of Palestine. He's a very intelligent person. And we go over all that. We go over the history and a lot of important stuff here, Palestine and Zionism. But he says in another tweet, wondering how is it that 95% of Jewish Israelis support Israel's genocidal war on Gaza, and how 60% of his Jewish Israelis support starving all of them to death? That's the question. I guess I didn't have to read that, just the same point. But all this information, it's just so shockingly obvious, and they just can't stop lying about it. Now, here is where we're at as of February 23rd. So obviously, there's a whole lot of time since then. But this is just the one I hold in high regard the Euromed human rights group, Euromed Monitor. So these are numbers that I feel, are objective as best they can be with an incomplete data set, meaning that we don't really know how many people are buried and so on. But even as Time Magazine covered, it's scientifically obvious that at least 30,000 people have been killed. Now, you can argue that there's Hamas in there, which nobody's arguing Hamas doesn't exist. I guarantee there's some level of that. But all it really shows you is that they're just bombing indiscriminately because they've never been able to prove any one. But I was going to say one other thing, just overall, that this is catastrophic. That the numbers here are clear. And the point I was going to make is the Time Magazine article made that point at least, because the reality is it's clearly, based on most every expert's assessment, way more than that. When you realize how many people have been buried under the rubble, how many people have been killed while they were sleeping, I mean, it's almost a foregone conclusion. And as they're saying now, as of February 23rd, 38,000 people killed. That is 14,300 children. Injured, 71,000. Journalists killed, 130. I mean, and they're breaking records all over the place. As I think Philip Lazzarini just shared, which I think we'll point out in a minute. Like we said, this is more children than 4 years of all the combined wars in the world combined. I don't even know how you can ever pretend that that's something other than what Israel's doing. These numbers are overwhelming. 600 mosques destroyed, 3 churches. Yeah, because there are Christian churches, we just don't talk about that have also been bombed. Now, here's a video that I'm going to play really quickly, and it's an emotional point, but I think it's important. Today is Mother's Day in Palestine. For the past 167 days, because we keep hearing that, right? 167 days, from the Israeli side about how long the people have been held in Gaza. Well, as they write, for the past 167 days, and far before, mothers in Gaza have been mourning their children, giving birth under bombardment and dire health conditions, and are struggling to find a way to feed their families. As it says here, it's been 167 days and 75 years. Ongoing, terrifying reality. So right now, what we're dealing with is this ploy. So as that's going on, the U.S. government trying to win favor by acting like they're trying to achieve a ceasefire. And a game where they present this narrative, which, by the way, is always how this has gone, where we all are speaking about a two-state solution, as if they're on the same page with Netanyahu. And then at that same moment, you see him speaking to his people in Israel saying, we'll never allow a two-state solution. And it's always and how many times have you heard me say that over the last 10 years? Suddenly, finally, it's on full display. That they're just pretending they want that when they clearly are told that's never happening. Or the ceasefire, for that matter. Netanyahu was clear, we're not doing that. If it ends up being we have to pull out of Gaza, we're not doing it. So it's Israel that is putting down the clear acknowledgement of what the sides wants we always talk about, which at least the pretend acknowledgement is that Israel wants the hostages back, right? So that's their big line, even though it's clear they don't want that, but that's their game. The Gaza side of this, Hamas is saying the very simple thing, and I'll show you in this discussion, that they want a ceasefire, which, whether ceasefire I guarantee no matter what they agree to, Israel will end up violating that down the line like they have every other time in the past, but arguably something that is lasting and a full exchange and letting aid in. Those are the only things that Hamas is asking for. Israel just says, no, we only want a temporary and some of the hostages. Now, why doesn't that bother the families? Yes, it does. They're now aware of this and screaming about that. So you're refusing a deal for all of the people back and asking for some instead, for a pause? How insulting is that? And the point is, everyone's beginning to recognize this, and all they can do is stand up and say, Hamas just rejected it again. That's what Blinken keeps saying. They rejected what nobody thinks makes any sense, because if all you're doing is offering one, and one of the deals actually was just getting back the Israeli hostages. That's it, and a temporary pause. Well, all it's going to allow is the hostages you want back, and maybe they let some go from the Israeli prisons. Some of the 10,000 they hold in administrative detention with no charge. A vast portion of them, and that's per the UN. They'll just arrest them back again like they did last time and then go right back to bombing. So all it really amounts to is just getting the one thing they want. And everyone in the deal knows that. Now, even if you don't think Hamas, they're terrorists and we shouldn't even care what they want. I'm not saying we care what they want. I'm saying if you're pretending this is a negotiation, you can't just demand they give me what I want and then it's over. What are you, 6 years old? This is kindergarten? Obviously they're going to go, well, no, that's not what anybody wants. And then you blame them for it. So you're clearly the responsible party, especially since we're dealing with a terrorist group, acting like they're somehow now culpable for their integrity or lack thereof. You're calling them a terrorist group. So obviously, why would you even think they would even come to the negotiating table? I'm belaboring the point. I think it's transparently obvious what's actually going on. And even their corporate media is beginning to call it out. Now, this was highlighted. Let me skim really quickly. Basically, the U.S. has drafted a new UN Security Council resolution calling for an immediate ceasefire, which is not even close to what that sounds like. It is a temporary pause, but that gets very, buried and muddled because they want people to think that's what they're calling for. So if they're calling for it, there must be Hamas stopping it, right? Which is amid mounting pressure on Israel to halt its military campaign and allow the delivery of substantial amounts of humanitarian aid. It says, after the declaration of imminent famine in parts of Gaza by a UN panel of experts earlier this week, the Biden administration has been ramping up efforts to call at least a temporary halt to fighting, not a ceasefire, on top of warning Israel against launching a ground invasion. Right, because your meek warnings have really done a lot so far, haven't they? Details of the new draft resolution were revealed as the UN released an analysis of satellite imagery showing that 35%, they claim, of buildings in Gaza have been destroyed or damaged. Now, look, going back to just this, I don't know how that's possible. It's really difficult to be able to tell for sure, but just based on these numbers, and these are low estimates from February, it says 99,600 homes completely destroyed, 241,400 partially destroyed, right? So we're talking like 350,000 homes at least destroyed or partially destroyed. Now, assuming, and we know that there are people living in these homes together, and we're talking 2.2 million people, to me, that sounds like you're getting close to the majority of them. Am I wrong? And the images that we're seeing show that. So just bear that in mind. These numbers are coming from, I don't think everybody in the United Nations is ever on the side of truth. But whatever that means, I just question everything, whether you think they're on your side or not. That's just how you stay objective and honest. But my point is, I think that doesn't line up with the facts. Either way, the U.S. has blocked previous attempts to pass ceasefire resolutions, pretty much every single one of them. And the new draft marks a significant step they claim to approach the conflict. Now, I hate the way they keep doing this. It's not a significant step. All you keep seeing is the deal on the table since the first week, Biden and Netanyahu pretending like they're deliberating while Hamas is going, we want the same thing that hasn't changed. And then Biden and Netanyahu have this really great talk, and they speak up and they go, we had a great decision. We're almost there. Only one last step. What do you think that is? Going to Hamas, who's going to refuse the obvious thing that they don't want. And they go, oh, we almost had it. All they're doing is playing the people who don't know any better to think that, if you go through that 4 times in a row, you're going to go, man, Hamas just won't let it happen. Even though it's clearly not what's actually going on per the people involved. Like the groups that even Qatar and Egypt have made clear statements about what's actually happening. Now, it says details of the resolution, which call for, quote, an immediate ceasefire tied to the release of hostages, which is that's the game they keep playing as if that hasn't always been the case. They're trying to pretend like the ceasefire wasn't tied to hostages, even though it was proven to be the case since the first week. The reason they're doing that is because they want you to think that's the new shift. Oh, so now Blinken's in there pushing for the hostages to be. It's not true. The families know that in Israel. As I forget her name now, from 972 magazine reported recently that they're now screaming at Netanyahu for taking Hamas's deal. That's what they're pushing him to do. Of course, the Western audiences don't get this because they're creating a very special propaganda just for you in the United States. And down here, now let me see, let's kind of skip through this. The U.S. has vetoed previous UN Security Councils on nearly 6-month war. Yeah, and it's objecting as recently as in February. Why? To the use of the term immediate. Immediate. So can't let it be right now. We got to make sure we let this go on and kill as much people as possible, as many people, until we finally go, okay, now. Like, that's just painful. So are we going to pretend that now suddenly they care about people, even though they're the ones that dragged this out until now? The reality is the pressure has become too much for them. It says in recent weeks, however, Washington has upped the pressure on its ally because of the pressure on them by people with a brain and morals. It says, while insisting that Hamas militants must immediately release the hostages. I mean, again, for somebody saying that, that should be laughed at. I mean, that's like in any kind of, like, you sit down at a negotiation table with people, right? They've got a property for sale and you've got money. And you simply go, I demand that you just give me the property. Do you agree? They're going to go, well, no, that's stupid. Now, what do I get for it? Like, it doesn't matter whether you think the person selling the home is a bad person, whether they're a terrorist. The point is, in any back and forth, if you're going to negotiate, it's not demands, even though that's how Israel and the United States operate. It's that you're supposed to come to some kind of a negotiation, right? Now, the point is, Hamas is literally letting up its only leverage and giving power back to Israel over the area as long as they get aid and they pull out of Gaza. I mean, so literally they're sacrificing the only leverage they have right now, that's some level of control. So that is a clear sacrifice. They're not gaining anything. They're going back to where they were before this started. Why you would frame that as them getting something out of this is incredible. Now, on the other side of it, Israel's getting everything they claim they want, which is the people back from hostages, even though that's not what they actually want. So it's very clearly one-sided. And then they just go, release them and it'll be over. Well, clearly, you know what it also ended? If Israel gave up and released their hostages, that would end it too. But both of those are ridiculous and not in reality. So let's stop screaming about it. That's the thing that Elon Levy kept doing, is just release them. But it says, quote, well, in fact, we actually have a resolution that we put forward right now. That's before the UN Security Council, which is only a temporary thing that no one's going to want other than them. And it says that does call for an immediate ceasefire. Oh, glad it took you 5 months to ask for it to be immediate. And he says, then we hope very much that countries that will support that. They won't. I mean, everybody's thus far, every time has wanted the one that's full and not the other. And the only one stopping it is the U.S. veto in Britain and the one from before. He says, I think that would send a strong message, he says. Blinken added that progress was being made in indirect negotiations between Israel and Hamas. No, it's not. This is the lie. Hamas is publicly telling them what's going on. And I'll show you even from the March 5th, where they made it clear, look, we're done. This is all we're asking for. It's what, if you don't give me at least this, we're not doing that. And those are the bare minimums. Again, that's back to what it was before October 7th. Now, Israel's framing that as unacceptable, but the reality is simply that if you keep pretending that you're not going to, I mean, obviously the deal is usually about giving up something. You don't get exactly what you want. It's a negotiation. So even if you agree that giving them back, we're not giving them anything by letting that become the status quo for a moment when Israel's going to go right back to it, all we're really talking about is getting the hostages safe, which is ultimately what they pretend that they want. And again, they'll go right back to attacking them the moment that's over. We know that will happen. But by framing that somehow as a loss, or by giving in to Hamas and letting them gain something, is the only way they're manipulating the average person. And of course, that's not even getting into the fact that Israel funded them into this position, allowed them to take this power, and has continued to work with them in other ways, and is also absolutely involved with allowing this to happen in the general sense on October 7th, is killing their own people, and all these other things that flavor this conversation. But he says the gaps are narrowing. I think the agreement is very much possible. No, same thing. They don't want that. They don't want the deal you're offering. But it says, while no vote has yet been scheduled, so it's kind of hype anyway, it sends the clearest message to Israel, they claim, that Biden is frustrated. Is that what it does? You're literally towing their line. You're giving them exactly what they want. So this is the Guardian trying to frame Biden as pushing back when all they're really doing is exactly what Israel wants. Now it says, and it comes after a warning from the UN human rights chief that Israel may be committing a war crime, using starvation as a method of war. Now, that's my point from before. It's important to realize that I don't know whether this person's honest or not, but in a hypothetical sense, if somebody is honest and understands that from the UN position or wherever you are, from the ICJ or whatever it is, that as an individual speaking, you can't litigate this from your chair, from your Twitter account or whatever else, right? Which means that you can have the evidence that proves that they did use starvation as a war crime or as a method of war, but his being an honest person, if that is the case, you would go, well, I can't just say that's proven because we're supposed to have to take that to court. So you're not technically proven to be doing it until we prove it in a court of law. You see, Israel and the U.S. don't care about that. Russia genocide, Uyghur genocide. Of course, when it's real genocide, it's like you have to wait and prove it. So what I'm saying is that we have to realize that at some level, there are people that truly, science and different studies we talk about where they say may be committing war crimes. And all that really means is they are, and they can prove it. And the ultimate game is we have to actually take it to a court of law to be able to say they are for sure, which probably will never happen. In reverse, you get them lobbing claims at everyone they want all the time. And then when you actually come to the process like the ICJ, they just blatantly ignore it. But it says officials from 36 countries have agreed to discuss this. Thursday's gathering is being attended by a bunch of people. That was generally it here. Let's go to the next one. That still has the highlight from the Wall Street Journal. A couple of extra points in this one. This is also from today. Now it says America's top diplomat, hardly, guy's a flounder. He's, or floundering. It says, said the U.S., and he's talking Blinken, by the way, said the U.S. had submitted the United Nations resolution calling for an immediate and sustained ceasefire. That's just a blatant lie by the Wall Street Journal. I'm surprised they even said that because even Blinken is making sure you know that it's temporary. But it says, and release the hostages, applying a new level of pressure on Israel. See, saying that's ridiculous. It says, quote, I think that would send a strong message. That's what they already said. That's Blinken speaking. And it says the draft UN resolution, which is likely to face opposition from other members of the Security Council, or otherwise all of them is the point, because of wording it contains specifically about restarting operations in Gaza after a pause. There's the truth for you. So in a paragraph later, you admit that it's not lasting. So why, or sustained? Why would you say that? In any case, it represents the latest point of divergence between Washington and Israel during an almost 6-month war in Gaza. Well, what they're really saying is that literally everybody, because that's how this works. It's basically the United States vetoing this, everybody else recognizing what Israel's doing, or at least for some political reason or calling it out, which is that they've written into this deal that's supposed to cause the stopping of this, that they're going to start it again. I mean, think about how brazen that is. That's why they're like, well, that's ridiculous. If the whole point is we want this to stop, why would we sign it when they're going, we're going to start right up again? It's just insulting to they're literally writing down we're going to keep genociding people based on the fact that most of the people in this room are of the mind that they're committing genocide. Why? Because they are. It says, quote, what we don't want to see is a major ground operation because we don't see how that can be done without doing terrible harm to civilians. Now, when that inevitably happens and there's unbelievable harm to civilians, recognize how they will just walk away from that statement, even though they put on record that what they're going to do will be terrible to civilians, meaning war crime, like every other act. But my point in saying that is, mark my words, when it happens, which I hope it doesn't, Blinken and Biden won't stand up and say, war crime. See, like we said, they're not. They're going to point to whatever paragraph he wrote, claiming it's a plan and act like everything was okay. But it says the U.S. had previously warned Israel about invading Rafah without a credible plan. But in recent days, they dropped even that caveat. See, so now they probably won't even ask for that. It says, quote, but at the same time, it is imperative to do something about Hamas because Hamas has brought nothing. Okay, so we can't let them do this thing that's going to kill all these civilians. But, Hamas, guys, Hamas and shields and stuff. That's not even an answer. So all you're really doing is giving that at the end to say, well, Hamas bad. So when they kill civilians, that's why that's going to be okay. That's what they just said. I mean, if you really understand how these people speak. Now it says, it is rare for the U.S. to advocate for a resolution that Israel would oppose at the UN, a forum where America has traditionally used its Security Council veto to shield Israel from unfavorable proposals. I mean, that's common knowledge, guys, that they're literally using their position as being able to veto as one of the few that can just to protect Israel from things that everybody else sees them doing. That has been the reality for so damn long. And then just say it openly because it's the truth. Now, Zero Hedge added another point to this. I'll read. And it's the same thing, submits the draft. It says down here, the Biden administration official touted Washington's hard work with Qatar and Egypt and Israel to get a strong proposal. All they're talking about is the discussions about what they're going to do, with Hamas saying we're not going to do anything but this at a very minimum. We'll debate all the rest of it, but these are the minimum things we need to make this a negotiation. They just don't care. They pretend that everyone else is on the same page, and they come back and it's like, oh, Hamas said no. Yeah, well, they already said that before you left if you didn't meet these basic things. It's like pretending that Hamas saying, we'll give you everything, but we're never releasing the hostages. Would that be okay? They're like, well, we'll give you every other thing you want, but we're going to keep them. Same thing, right? You're just kind of giving them a hard line on their basics on this. But he goes on to say, or the article goes on to say, but Hamas declined to accept it, just like I told you. Instead, he came back with other requests and demands. This is, of course, if Hamas cares at all about the people it purports to represent, then it would reach an agreement, because that would have an immediate effect on a ceasefire, alleviating the tremendous suffering of people, bringing more humanitarian assistance in, and giving us the possibility of having something more, which, by the way, Netanyahu's been explicit about is not on the table, that he's going to continue the war even if hostages are released. I mean, how is this not transparent? So even then, Netanyahu was like, no, we're going to keep going. So it's not going to be a lasting anything. It's going to get what he wants. He's going to go back to it. He's made that clear. He's promised that. So why would Hamas agree to something temporary if they know it's not going to alleviate the tremendous suffering of the people? Because all you're going to do is continue to not give them aid, because that's not going to change. They're going to keep pretending they're doing it. Like right now, they're claiming they're doing it. They're saying other people are stopping it. So why do you think that's going to change when suddenly the deal is made? They're going to keep going, we've been doing it the whole time. It's still them. That's what they're going to do. And they're going to use that to argue Hamas is the reason they're not getting it, and that's going to be the reason they pretend they broke the ceasefire. It's the same thing they've always done. And this is why they're going, no, we need a ceasefire, which they're still going to violate, mark my words, a full ceasefire and a full hostage exchange and humanitarian aid. At the very least, they want that, because then it will be on record that Israel's violating it, even though they're going to make up a lie about it. These are all my opinions, but historically, it's what happens. It says the quickest path to ending that is getting this immediate ceasefire with the release of hostages. Then a lot more becomes possible. No, it doesn't. You release the hostages, they're going to do whatever they want, because then there's no issue to stop for. They're not going to give more aid because you give their hostage back. They're going to do it more. Now, Hamas responds to the ceasefire proposal, but accuses Israel of stalling, was on February 5th. This is what I keep saying, is that Israel didn't even send delegates to the last discussion, or I think it was even the one before last. And yet Biden still pretended like they were in the middle of this whole deal. This is what they said on the 5th. He said on the 5th that there could be, quote, no exchange of prisoners before a permanent ceasefire and a full Israeli withdrawal from Gaza, as it responded to proposals from Egypt and Qatar. So they know too. It says, quote, the security and safety of our people will not be achieved except through a permanent ceasefire and the end of the aggression. Israel's withdrawal from every inch of Gaza and the entry of aid to our people in Gaza is our utmost priority. How does anybody act like that's something other than the most obvious reality? That's saying, give us what was there before October 6th. And of course they say, why would we give you back after you invaded? Well, you're negotiating. That's why. Okay, so you act like all you're going to do is get what you want out of the situation. Well, you're clearly acknowledging you don't want to negotiate, which means you don't care about the people that are taken. Either way, all they're asking for is the ceasefire, the withdrawal, and the aid. Which, by the way, is literally what the pause does, but just a shorter period of time, which is the reality. Israel wants to keep destroying these people. Any prisoner exchange will not be completed except after the completion of all this. Pretty simple. Quote, we have affirmed our conditions for a ceasefire, complete withdrawal from the sector, the return of displaced persons to the area as they left, especially in the north, they said, and the provision of sufficient aid, relief, and reconstruction. But they don't want that, because they've already discussed how they're going to take the north now. That's already part of the plan. Reuters and Al Jazeera, which, by the way, your people are going to shout down until eventually happens, but it's already being discussed. As usual, we're far ahead of the things that you're going to hear in the mainstream alternative media or the corporate media. Reuters and Al Jazeera reported last week that Hamas was reviewing the draft proposal, another lie, for an initial ceasefire lasting roughly 6 weeks. Think about it, and again, they're pointing at what's happening today, right? This is the March 5th. They're pointing forward, saying this is what they're going to get to. That's the 6 weeks pause that they're currently saying they're putting forward for a resolution. Hamas is not going to agree to that. Now, if they do, mark my words, it is going to end up just like I described. And it says, during which 40 Israeli hostages would be exchanged for 400 Palestinian prisoners. 400 out of 10,000. And why only 40? Why would you only want 40 when they've got more of, like, why wouldn't you agree to take them all back? I mean, how do you misunderstand that? Hamdan's response came out just hours after U.S. President Biden said potential ceasefire was in the hands of Hamas. Just all they keep doing. It says, we have to wait and see what Hamas does. You realize that's while they know they've already put that foot down. It's just dishonest. A couple points last on this one from NBC. Says Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu approved an Israeli delegation to go to Qatar tomorrow as part of an ongoing hostage negotiation, his office said today, which, again, there's not a negotiation happening. Same point. But it says the Israeli military said today that it had killed, we're going to go into Al-Shifa next, 50 Palestinian gunmen over the past day in fighting around Al-Shifa hospital. It added that over 140 suspected Hamas fighters had been killed during the, quote, precise operational activity at the complex, which it says was being used as a base of the militant group, even though they've already claimed that, failed to prove it, and now they've gone back and done it again. And you realize what they just said, right? This is their claim. This is NBC citing what Israeli military said. They have killed over 140 suspected Hamas fighters in their precise operation. Yeah, so they're just, I mean, I actually think it's that they didn't even think about it. I think these people are so pro-genocidal in their minds, and some of them, the Zionist crazy ones in this whole situation, that they're literally telling you that we didn't even know for sure, but because they're all bad, Palestinians are bad, we killed them all. Suspected Hamas fighters are not Hamas fighters. Now, Zachary Foster points out, by the way, as they're discussing the Rafah situation in general, which was one of the points about where it's going to go, I just want to include in regard to the ceasefire, because that's the last kind of edging point here, their claim that Rafah needs to happen. The Israel's invasion of Rafah is not something that may or may not happen in the future. This is what I keep telling you as well. Now, the ground operation in a bigger sense may be happening, but Israel has been massacring Palestinians in Rafah for weeks on end. And that's just since October 7th. But the point is, if they're already bombing, like I keep telling you, which they are, New York Times, bombing in Rafah kills at least 11. Israel intensifies strikes on Gaza and Rafah, killing large families in their home on the 21st of February. Here's Amnesty International. New evidence of unlawful Israeli attacks in Gaza causing mass civilian casualties. In Rafah. Rafah massacre, 14 killed on the 19th of March. That was 3 days ago. The point is, guys, that they're already bombing in the place that we're told is a safe zone before they've even presented where they're supposed to go. How do you not see that as literally bombing fish in a barrel or shooting fish in a barrel? There's no way to pretend that's not a war crime. Now, on that point, let's focus on a small example of this, or a focused example. Here is Mr. They have a list, Mr. Hagari, who in just embarrassing fashion clumsily puts this video together where he's talking about what happened. There's probably 5 edits in this video, even though he's just 2 minutes talking about what happened. So it just shows you how clearly these things are produced. But listen to what he has to say about this, and then we'll break down how much of what he's saying is complete lies. Daniel Hagari delivered an operational update about how ongoing operations within Al-Shifa Hospital.
Here at Shifa Hospital. This is the entrance to the hospital. This is the Qatari building. This is the emergency room. In this compound, many Hamas terrorist operatives and senior ones have been hiding in the hospital. And also Islamic Jihad group has been hiding in the...
So note, first of all, that we're just going, this is what happened. I said, there's no evidence. But on top of that, they're going to start folding in Palestinian Islamic Jihad. We're seeing it more and more. The point is because it's not going to end with whatever they say is the end of what happened with Hamas. Like, let's just say they actually annihilate Hamas, whatever that looks like. That's not going to be the end of this. They're still Palestinian Islamic Jihad has 3 times the numbers of Hamas. It's true. And there's also other groups as well. There's a few of them, or I think even more than that. And so you're starting to see them quietly fold in because they say, oh, remember the notes they found supposedly was thanking Islamic Jihad as well as Hamas. Now they're saying that they have evidence of them being there too. So all that's proving is just like we said, the moment they get whatever they're doing done here, if they need a new excuse, they're going to say, oh, but Islamic Jihad too. It's the same thing.
This hospital. When we entered the hospital, we were finding terrorists fighting against us here in this area. Until now, we have arrested over 250 Hamas and Islamic Jihad terrorists that we identified. We're still conducting an investigation on over another 350 people that we suspect that they are also connected to terror. Until now, none, civilians, doctors, medic teams, none have been hurt.
That's such a blatant lie. I mean, that's just horrifyingly wrong. And it's everybody's calling this out. Specifically, Euromed Human Rights Group has broken down this investigation. It's pretty horrifying. Mass civilian executions that have been there's even evidence of them, the way that they're speaking about the civilians that they know are there, telling that if you come outside, we're going to shoot you. It's all in the record. I'll show it to you next. So just recognize as he's making these claims, all of this is easily proven to be false.
Doctors,
He said here,
now none, civilians, another 350, conducting an investigation on over another 350 people that we suspect that they are also connected to terror.
And right, the point we just made before, that's what I was trying to remember, is that if they just admitted that they killed, and that's NBC citing the Israeli military. Not that that means it's any more real than anything else. My point is, for the average person, that means more. Shouldn't. That they're citing the Israeli military, saying that they killed 140 suspected Hamas members. So isn't it interesting how those numbers seem to interestingly overlap? How do we not take that as you just told us you killed civilians, or at least people that you weren't sure were Hamas?
Until now, none, civilians, doctors, medic teams, none have been hurt. Only
Despite the doctors that have later come out and told you, or told the world that they were beat up, tortured, some of them were killed. They testified that they shot people and watched it happen. He knows that. He just doesn't care. Right? What else are you going to do? The world sees you're a genocidal actor. The best you can do is lie about it.
the terrorists. We are supplying food, water. We have supplied yesterday 2 generators to the emergency room because there was a problem with electricity.
I mean, just think about how ridiculous this is. So you're telling us that you're going to block aid, you're going to actively siege the area, you're going to bomb all these hospitals, you're going to literally attack the hospital, bomb the hospital, and then bring them supplies for the second time? Like, I mean, it's insulting. And on top of that, realize there are people that were there who are telling you what happened, and it's not that. There's even this fake video they put out pretending they delivered humanitarian aid in the middle of the night. As far as I can tell, it's actually an old video, but either way, it's ridiculous to pretend, even as they've been caught 15 times, I can tell, in the last 10 seconds for lying about delivering aid. Elon Levy just got fired for lying about aid. This is what they do. And I'm going to go through an important part about this today, an article that discusses how the propaganda is the ridiculous propaganda is only working on the people that matter most. And that's the argument, meaning that it's only really aimed at the Zionist, people are believing what they want to believe. And the propaganda is only meant to influence the White House, the media, and Israeli Zionist manipulators. And the reality of the evidence is overwhelming. Like the one we showed you where they shot that old man in the back, right? Where they literally walked with him and pretended they were helping him and then shot him in the back. That's a provable case. You think that the people that would do that would want to help these people? You're telling us the IDF, every which way you can see, telling you that they hate Palestinians, that they don't think they should exist, that Gaza's not theirs, that they're all terrorists, that they're going to otherwise help them? I mean, it's just every angle of this makes this outrageously ridiculous.
We're supplying also technicians to fix the problems inside the emergency room and the generators. We are also supplying medic teams to assist with everything or anything that is needed. We found in the compound over 11 million shekels used by Hamas.
We'll get to that in a second.
Giving the money to his operatives to conduct terror from the northern Gaza.
I mean, I'll go back to it in a second, but ask yourself, how comical is that? So you're telling us that so somebody's giving money to Hamas for aid? Who exactly delivers cash for aid? Aid comes in the form of delivery trucks full of aid and water and materials. So if you're pretending that somebody's giving money, oh, that's right. It was Israel giving them money. Billions of dollars, in fact. Remember, he sent the Mossad chief to Qatar to petition them to make sure they got that $billions of dollars? That's what we're talking about. So if you're going to pretend you found money, which I, first of all, don't even think is real, How are you pretend that implicates anybody other than Israel? Are we pretending the UN is delivering suitcases full of cash? I mean, it wouldn't surprise me, but the point is that's not even what they're claiming. They're literally just claiming that this was aid somehow for Palestinians, and it was delivered in the form of cash. I mean, I actually don't think these people are even smart enough to recognize how dumb that is.
Hamas have tried to control again Shifa Hospital as a hub to conduct all its terror mission in northern Gaza. We call Hamas terrorists to surrender. We call it, and we speak by Arabic speakers here on the ground, but they are still hiding in this building.
That's how they pretend that they gave them, we said to get out of the way. And so anybody left in there is either Hamas or Human Shield or supporting Hamas. So all you really do is create a narrative that makes you that in your mind justifies killing whoever's anywhere all the time.
In the emergency room, exploiting and using the patients and the medic teams. This is Hamas. And we will reach every terrorist in this compound until we finish the mission.
It's just embarrassing. Right, and shekels, right? So is the UN now giving them shekels? Is that how that works? It's just bad. It's bad propaganda. Now, if you remember, we already talked about this conversation all the way back to the original, where they sieged the hospital before, bombed and killed people, and they reported the same thing. They were shooting people as they tried to come out of the building, which is happening now too. All of it's provable. We'll get into some of the evidence in a second. And it just makes you, I wonder, does this guy see this stuff? Is this Hagari even aware of the fact that he looks like a complete, he has become a cartoon figure of this whole situation. There is a list. We'll break that down in a second. A calendar or a baby bottle or some dates in a room all become Hamas because they're in the room that you claim is Hamas room. It's just, they're bad at this. And the tunnel that they claimed was under this hospital was built by Israel, which we claimed. Even the former Prime Minister Barak admitted that in a CNN interview. It's provable. And on top of that, they were caught explicitly lying about the thing they said was a command center. It was really embarrassing. Everybody called them out. And in this exact example, which will relate to the next video we show you, they were caught bringing in things on these boxes with like old 90s printer paper on that said like human aid. It was really bad. And then those boxes were found out to be full of guns they placed in the rooms that we saw them get caught for even by the BBC. Remember, they called it out. They said, what's this over here? And the box was gone next. It's clear they keep doing this. They're bringing stuff in and they're using this to justify killing all these people. And we just talked about the recent version of this on the 18th. Again, attacks Al-Shifa, which is still ongoing. Here's what Zachary Foster said, breaking down the Euromed Monitor investigation. The Israeli military is taking Palestinians in groups of 3 to 10 people at a time and executing them inside of the hospital. This is exactly what happened to my grandfather's family, slaughtered by Polish police collaborating with the Nazis. Remember, Zachary Foster is Jewish himself, and he has a PhD in history, Palestinian history from Princeton, And he's simply highlighting what this breaks down. And here's the report itself that says, and this is from yesterday, the ongoing Israeli massacre in the Gaza city's Al-Shifa medical complex and surrounding areas has left at least 100 Palestinians dead. Don't forget, the Israeli military already admitted to killing 140 suspected Hamas members. It couldn't be more plain. They're admitting they didn't even know for sure if it was Hamas. It says many of whom were victims of extrajudicial executions after their arrest, which has already been proven, by the way. Amnesty International did a report about it. They proved that they were killing people. We have the last example of Al-Shifa that lined him up, or even the example of the, I forget what hospital or location that was, where it was the one that got a lot of attention, where the first time it was really on a big display, where they had him on their knees, all naked with the blindfolds, and people were like, that's my brother. That's what's his name from the hospital, like average people. And then most of them ended up getting released anyway. And what did Mossad account and Elon Levy and Eli David, what did they all do? Look at all the terrorists that just surrendered. Even though they later admitted that they didn't, they just were investigating. Why? Because all these propagandists have a vested interest in just saying whatever works for you to think that they're right. It's desperation or impunity, perceived anyway. It says the international community must intervene immediately to put an end to this atrocity. He says newly released detainees and eyewitnesses, so people that were there that were part of it and people that were witnessing, which I have a video of, by the way, from outside, told Euromed Human Rights Monitor that Israeli army forces had carried out unlawful killings and executions, which should not be that hard for you to wrap your mind around, against displaced Palestinian civilians inside Al-Shifa medical complex for 3 days in a row, and that the military operations there are ongoing. Now, we have the examples coming from, like the 972 magazine, talking about the mass assassination factory, or numerous other investigations that prove this is something that they are doing, bombing buildings just to bomb buildings, making sure Palestinians are always living in fear, things that they've openly admitted to, or organ theft or human shields or everything else that we've proven are accusing them of that which you are guilty. Unlawful killings and executions at the Al-Shifa medical complex for 3 days in a row. Now, there's plenty of examples of this kind of stuff. I mean, the fact that they're just murdering civilians on a large, massive scale right now should make you easy to wrap your mind around this is happening. But I think we need to recognize how obvious this has been because of the individuals posting on their TikToks and their Telegrams where they're openly telling you that they want to kill these people. Now, it doesn't have to be every one of them. As I said, there's some people that are resigning or leaving the IDF because they can't do it. I think we all know why. I think it's a focus on the people that are willing to kill these people because they think that they're not, whatever you think their impression is, but all the stuff that they're openly saying. It's not my opinion. Now, it says Israeli soldiers repeatedly took prisoners into the hospital's morgue area, that gunshots were then heard, and that the soldiers left without the prisoners. Over and over. It says the soldiers detained me and handcuffed me in the hospital courtyard. I was left undressed for more than 9 hours. It says about 4 times during that period, I saw soldiers lead groups of detainees. It said about at least 3 people and sometimes more than 10 into the hospital building, particularly the morgue building where bodies were previously been kept. Gunshots were heard. The soldiers then leaving the area bring another group there. Never to be seen again. Now realize the kind of flimsy information like the Habsora program and the mass assassination program we're using, that they existed in the same building, that they shared a phone call. These people, these things were used to kill people. So here we are, where they're suspected and they're shooting them and they're openly talking about it. Why do you think it's that hard to think that some of the people that might be, question it for sure, but realize that it's not hard to see that they've already justified this in every which way. They're all Hamas anyway, aren't they? Don't they all work for Hamas? Aren't they all terrorists either because they support them or they voted for them? It's every which way. And it says 100 Palestinians were killed by Israeli gunfire in and outside of the hospital that they can prove. The Israeli army has acknowledged that it killed 90 people. And again, we just showed you the most up-to-date one where they're admitting 140 over the last 3 days. But it says 90 during an ongoing military operation in Al-Shifa medical complex. An international committee must be established to investigate the war crimes and crimes against humanity committed by the Israeli forces as part of its genocide campaign, which includes planned killings and executions against civilians that are outside of the purview of law and judiciary. Meanwhile, Israel's army is still arbitrarily detaining hundreds of civilians for the 3rd day in a row. This is yesterday. It's probably still happening today, including medical personnel and immobile patients amid an environment of intimidation and heavy Israeli gunfire. About 320 people have already been detained. Journalists, medical professionals, displaced people, many of whom have been tortured and forced to remain fully nude or dressed in flimsy white clothes out in the open weather. More than half, which it can be very cold. More than half of these individuals have been transported in trucks and military vehicles to Israeli detention facilities. Some of them probably never to be seen again unless they get taken out because of some deal. The point is that we just discussed the guy that was in prison, administrative detention for 20 years. That was a public discussion. That was an international conversation. 20 years. There's 10,000 of those. Now, I should say 10,000 people that are in those prisons, a huge portion of that. The number that I'll go with that we know we can, it's provably more than this. And even Zachary would point this out, but the numbers he cited was 3,400 something were provably administrative detentions. They were there without charge. Think about how wild that is, as we're pointing to a smaller, much smaller number, as if that's the only thing that matters, when it does matter. They all matter, is the point. Quds News Network points out the Israeli occupation has now admitted to executing 140 Palestinians since the start of its operation Al-Shifa, which I just showed you, by the way. So next time you see Quds News Network, which, by the way, you shouldn't blindly assume anyone's correct, it's just text on Twitter, but just recognize that the way that it's regarded as, it's Palestinian propaganda. Well, NBC just reported the same thing. Now, here is one of these videos that's going around, and you'll see this. It's an Al Jazeera investigation. I'm sure they're probably going to give me a strike for this one, too. It says, video revealed that by Jazeera from Al-Shifa Hospital. Israeli officer today, and this is on the 21st, is today, on the loudspeakers telling women and children who are left in the hospital, quote, if you get out of the building, we will shoot you. Don't play with us. Once we get the hostages, we will allow you to leave. Which, even though historically since October 7th, they've let them walk out and then shot those people too. That's happened at least 3 times that we can prove. I think one of them was Al-Aqsa, and I think Al-Shifa was even last time, where they kept telling, come on out, and then shoot them. That was reported by corporate media, which a lot of this tends to be these days. But either way, it's not in English, but the point is that they're saying, if you come outside, we'll shoot you. Now, it doesn't matter what you think about that. That's a crime. These are civilians. This is them directly choosing to speak to civilians, whatever they think of them. The world's supposed to think they don't want to kill them, but I think that's obviously not the case. But saying, if you come up, we'll shoot you. So if they walked out and they shot them, that would be a war crime. And they're basically just admitting the blithe kind of disregard for any of these people's lives. And right, and these are people that have already been displaced. Like, I mean, not even counting. Oh, and here's all the people that inside. Not even counting, 75 years of however many times these people might have been displaced from the first, second Nakba. But going forward, just October 7th. Displaced over and over again from place to place, bombed as they go. Right? And now they're seeking shelter in the hospital because they have nowhere else to go. And now they're attacking the hospital, probably shooting them as they try to get food and water wherever they can. I mean, how are they supposed to get food if they're stuck inside the hospital? It really just shows them. He's just listening. You can just hear them. If you come out, we will kill you. Sure sounds like a democracy or whatever you want to pretend this is, right? Now, here is another article discussing this. This Daily Sabah saying Al-Shifa Hospital death toll hits 140 as Israeli army continues raid. This is today. So as it says, the death toll from an ongoing Israeli raid on Gaza Al-Shifa hospitals climbed to 140. The invading army has confirmed today. The Israeli army said that its forces killed 50 more Palestinians in and around Shifa in Gaza City today. Quote, since the beginning of the operation, over 140 have been killed. Now, to them, they're in many other conversations being framed as just Hamas. But the important point is that ABC has reported they said it was a suspected terrorism group. I think that's hugely important. But it says Army Chief of Staff Haaretz Halevi acknowledged Wednesday that the hospital raid aims to, quote, pressure Hamas during indirect negotiations for a hostage deal. Think about that. So there's an army chief on the record saying that the only reason we're doing this is to pressure them for negotiations. Think about how crazy that is. So you could take that as we're just bombing Palestinian civilians or suppressing them or hurting them or destroying infrastructure in hopes of pressuring Hamas to take the deal that they don't want, which they only want the deal so they can help these people to not continue to be ethnically cleansed, or at least some of them for that matter. This is the kind of on-the-record, open disregard for, everything Biden and Blinken pretend that they're doing. Every one of these things should be used, and they will be most likely in the world court when that time comes to prove that they didn't care about human life. The occupation army bombed the specialized surgery building in Al-Shifa Hospital because they care about them, right? Because that was a Hamas headquarters? No, it's because you're destroying whatever they're able to put back together. Palestinian TV, I'll make sure I didn't have it scroll here. Okay, that was it. Palestinian TV reported that the occupation forces threatened to displace people inside of Al-Shifa complex through loudspeakers and demanded their immediate evacuation from the complex. So that's today. So here we are the other day saying, I just said this, saying, if you leave, we're going to shoot you. And the very next day they say, if you don't leave, we're going to shoot you. That sure sounds fair, doesn't it? Sure sounds like they care about civilians. And how about the fact that they were just told if they come out, they're going to be killed. And now you're going, come out, come out. How's that worked so far in the past? And now they say, well, they didn't leave, so therefore they're Hamas. You see how this works? And of course, the Blinken, Biden, mainstream media, some of it will come out and say they gave them warnings and human shields and blah, blah, blah. And that's actually how that worked. The artillery bombardment resulted in widespread fires, killing and injuring dozens of Palestinians, including women and children, and forcing hundreds to flee. Now, where's Hamas at this point? Are they giving evidence of Hamas? Is it funny how evidence only seems to matter when it's anybody else giving allegations? Israel could just say Hamas everywhere, therefore we're killing everyone, and nobody asks for evidence. If you're claiming Hamas is there, shouldn't you have some kind of evidence about that? Do you have a video? Do you have I don't care if it's an informant. At least say this guy said he was there. They don't say anything. They just say we know they're there, therefore bad guys, and we're going to kill them. Over and over and over. Isn't that a little crazy? It is. Since early Monday morning, Israeli forces continue to raid Al-Shifa complex with killings, shootings, and wide-scale arrests carrying out among the displaced inside the hospital and shelling of nearby houses, just for good measure. Earlier Wednesday, the Israeli army announced the killing of 90 Palestinians and the interrogation of 300 of them at Shifa, while arresting 160 and taking them to Israel for interrogation. So 140 killed, 50 more today, 300 interrogation, 160 taken to Israel. Right? Does anybody care to investigate any of this? Are they? I'm just getting so exhausted with the fact that we have to keep even objectively pretending like this isn't the most obvious thing in the world. Last week, scores of Palestinians were killed and injured in intense Israeli army shelling near the hospital as they were breaking their fast for Ramadan. There was no narrative about that. That was just lobbing some bombs at them to keep them in their place. Here is New York Post, Israeli military says it killed 90 gunmen in raid against hospital. This what I said before. The numbers are interestingly overlapped. Now here's Caitlin Johnstone saying someone who loves you like Israel loves find someone who loves you like Israel loves attacking Palestinian hospitals.
Find someone who loves you like Israel loves attacking Palestinian hospitals. The World Health Organization has issued a statement saying that it has recorded 410 Israeli attacks on Gazan healthcare services since October 7th, resulting in 685 fatalities, 902 injuries, and damage to 99 facilities. As of this writing, there is a still ongoing IDF assault on Al-Shifa hospital, which according to Israel has resulted in scores of Palestinian deaths and the capture of hundreds of prisoners. This is the fourth time Israel has attacked this particular hospital, which happens to be the largest in Gaza. Survivors of the assault have told Euromed Human Rights Monitor that they repeatedly witnessed groups of prisoners being walked into the hospital morgue by IDF troops, then heard the sound of gunfire, then saw the IDF troops returning without the prisoners, which is probably exactly what it would look and sound like if the IDF was conducting mass summary executions at Al-Shifa Hospital. In an article for the Washington Post titled "How Biden Became Embroiled in a Gaza Conflict with No End in Sight," the Western press have an extensive track record of constantly framing U.S. military aggressions as passive entanglements that the global superpower keeps innocently stumbling and bumbling its way into by accident. Yasmin Abu Talib and John Hudson report that according to their sources, the Biden White House misrepresented the intelligence whose claims were used to justify the first Al-Shifa raid back in November. Senator Chris Van Hollen, a Democrat, told the Washington Post that there was a marked discrepancy between what White House officials were saying publicly about Al-Shifa and what the intelligence they'd seen actually said. Quote, Van Hollen, who had received a classified briefing about the U.S. intelligence on Al-Shifa, said there were important and subtle differences between what Biden officials were saying publicly and what the intelligence actually showed. I did find there to be some disconnect between the administration's public statements and the classified findings.
I'm shocked. I can't believe they wouldn't just tell you the truth. Obviously, we all know that's how this works, but just recognize how often that's the reality, almost nearly entirely. Well, they just come out and give you the carefully crafted narrative, which almost usually is a lie, or at least omitting huge parts of and then they just behind the scenes, and then we're supposed to regard them as being honest and altruistic when we know they lie about everything. It's pretty ridiculous. But this is why this is all starting to kind of break apart. You can't lie about everything and think this is going to last.
Senator said, end quote. In December, when it was all long over, the Washington Post published a report which found that the evidence presented by the Israeli government falls short of showing that Hamas had been using the hospital as a command and control center.
Yep.
It was obvious that Israel was lying about Al-Shifa at the time back in November, with psyops like a non-existent Hamas calendar being discovered in the hospital, and a fake video purporting to show an Al-Shifa nurse saying the hospital was overrun with Hamas fighters being debunked as fast as they could be produced. The evidence for the justification of this raid doesn't appear to be any more robust, with the IDF publishing highly dubious footage of what it claims are Hamas terrorist funds found inside Shifa Hospital, complete with notes accompanying the money thanking Hamas by name for their good work. Yeah,
That's the kind of clumsy stuff we're talking about. Like step 1, 2, 3 step instructions for how to rape somebody. Like these are like, I think it's either indicative of how dumb they are or how dumb they think we are. However you look at it, it's really bad. Notes stuff. Hey, thank you, Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad. Thank you for your terror activities. That's what they're talking about. It's really stupid. And then the money, again, the same point. Who's giving them money exactly? Who's giving them shekels? Who do you think that's actually coming from? Why would they hand Hamas money? I mean, it's ridiculous. It's because Israel was giving them money, and that's on the record at this point. We'll show you next. So they're literally going, look at what we gave them. That's why they're terrorists. It's like that's what I'm saying. But that's not why. The point is that you wanted that to be the case. Today, I genuinely think there's some level of this conversation where this group has become a genuine resistance group. That's why I think we have the leadership protected in Qatar, the group that they're keeping safe because that's their asset, and then some level of influence over here, but mostly people that are just recognizing they're fighting against a state that is oppressing them. But it's a mixed bag. If you know they've been funding them, and they have, we should always be skeptical. And that's what this video I'm going to get into tomorrow is. It makes a great point about that. You could prove historically prove that Mossad has even stated they have assets within Hamas. So shouldn't we ask whether those were the ones that committed crimes on October 7th or those were the ones? I mean, yes, I'm not saying we can know that, but it should be at least something we consider.
okay, sure. People have been somehow sending Dear Hamas letters to the militant group with wads of cash enclosed, and Hamas has been keeping both the cash and the letters at Al-Shifa Hospital.
Which, by the way, is the place where they keep telling you for years that that's where their headquarters is, because that makes perfect sense, right? Let's keep it safely in the place they're probably going to come after.
Where they were kind enough to leave it for the incoming IDF raid to discover.
Right.
Sounds legit. Definitely not the sort of thing Israel has been caught lying about many times before. Israel's constant fixation on attacking healthcare facilities makes no sense from a military strategic point of view, but it makes plenty of sense from a genocidal point of view. Hospitals are where people are brought to save their lives after they've been badly injured or have become acutely malnourished or sick, and they're where civilians would normally take shelter when nowhere else is safe. All the way back in December, we were already seeing reports that Gaza's healthcare system has been effectively destroyed by the nonstop attacks on healthcare facilities and the siege warfare cutting the enclave off from much-needed medical supplies. Now we are seeing Israel repeatedly attacking those same facilities, ensuring that they remain non-functioning despite all the most resilient efforts of the people of Gaza to stay alive. This is exactly what it looks like. The narrative managers of Israel and the West will try to spin and distort the information you're seeing right in front of your face to try and make you believe you're seeing something other than what you're seeing. But the truth really couldn't be more self-evident. This is a genocide. If it wasn't, Israel wouldn't be methodically destroying hospitals while bombing and starving the population they've been oppressing for generations.
Mm-hmm. Hard to disagree with that. Sad that it's that obvious, isn't it? But here is, and actually, where did I put that? Wait, how did that end up all the way over here? Hold on a second. Oh, it's way over there. So this is what he referenced in that video. I guess we'll come back to that. I guess, I think you organized this, and the point was that we'll talk about this. It's in the discussion about the atrocity propaganda. Either way, the video itself it highlights such an obvious reality, and really it's just about common sense. Now, common sense is not the only thing that matters, right? Facts and provable evidence matter, but it's just so self-evident. You can't, like this is what I've been saying before about how there's really no narrative that suddenly makes this acceptable. It doesn't really matter what you're saying. No matter how you spin this, the Israeli government is at the very least pushing this forward, fanning the flames of what is hurting these people. Like, so if your acknowledgement is that the only reason they're all dying is because Hamas they're tied to all their legs. Well, okay, so let's just say you think that's actually what's happening, how ridiculous that actually is, and there's zero evidence to back that up. The world has now made it clear, look, we're not okay with this. You can't just keep murdering all these children because you claim you're going after Hamas, and then others sometimes going, oops, but he wasn't there. Our bad. Well, so clearly then you don't even know for sure that they're there. So all that's showing people is that even if everything they're saying is true, we're still not okay with this. And they still keep doing it anyway. And they still keep murdering children. And by the way, there's an endless amount of examples of ways that you can prove there's no way there was human shields. Like the 6 children that left to starve to death in the incubators in that hospital, or any number of children that are just actually starving to death because they aren't getting food either while Elon Levy pretends there's food everywhere, or on and on and on and on. Any number of examples where you can clearly show that they're being killed by the IDF. Or how about just the hostages that the IDF admitted that they killed? On and on and on. Now, here's one of the examples of Kogat lying about this exact situation, because this group, guys, is a prominent player in the ongoing lie about what's going on here. And again, the point I make is this is a group that one of the primary focuses right now is coordinating and facilitating humanitarian aid. So as I've said before, and it applies to all of them, by the way. This is worse than terrorism. If you're a terrorist, you're out there murdering people, and in many cases taking credit for it, right? These are people that are knowingly murdering people in the worst way possible, and then not only then asking for praise for doing the opposite. It's just disconcerting. It makes me uncomfortable. These kind of people shouldn't be in these kind of positions to tending to be helping people. But it says, while Hamas continues to use Shifa Hospital as a terror stronghold, the thing that nobody's proven, that they keep stating, even though the very last time they made that claim, it blew up in their face and it was embarrassing. I just went right back to it. The IDF operate precisely against them. Precisely. Is that we just went over the precise effort of killing 160 people that you suspect being Hamas. Is that precise? Against them and deliver humanitarian aid. So on top of the claim that they're precisely going after Hamas, even though they literally admitted the opposite, somehow while they're engaging with Hamas, they were also delivering aid to the building that they said Hamas was in. I mean, I've said this earlier, maybe the first couple of weeks. I'm like, is this supposed to be seen? Like, is it really? I just find it hard to believe that people that have been in these positions this long with finances how are they this bad at this? So just, again, do I even have to explain that? So you're invading, by the way, right to this day, this is happening. This is posted on the 20th, yesterday. Today, they're still going after Hamas, they claim, in this building. We just showed you the article from today. So you were being told yesterday that in between going after Hamas in that building, they decided to drop off all these boxes full of aid and stuff that they claim Hamas might be able to use in that building. I guess I don't even know how to explain how stupid that is. Here's the video. Of course, that doesn't want to play. Night camera footage, they say, of humanitarian aid entering the Shifa hospital. So if their entire argument is that they at first didn't want Hamas to take it, then why would you deliver aid? Like, remember the first argument was, we can't bring in food and water and just give Hamas. So you're putting food aid in the building that you are today fighting because Hamas is there. I mean, my God. This is Kogat lying to you like they have been doing the entire time. This is not even getting into what we just showed you about people that were there that said they're not doing that. There's no aid. They're shooting people. They're not letting anybody leave. Now they're asking us to leave and they're shooting us as we leave. Here is Al Jazeera from the 21st. WHO chief warns the future of generation in peril as Gaza famine looms. The point here, where was it? So one thing I forgot to read the whole thing. So what it says, while Hamas continues to use the Shifa hospital as a terror stronghold, the IDF operate precisely against them and deliver humanitarian aid. Which again, I just really want people to don't miss how stupid that is. But it then goes on to say, we coordinated the supply and supplied a fuel truck to aid the civilian population. So what did you do? Did you put the fuel in generators and then left it for Hamas? Or did you leave it in a secret place that only the civilians would know how to get to? Also very stupid. If your argument is that you can't do this because Hamas, then you just gave it to them and you're supposed to pretend like that now makes sense because you're trying to make a point about why you're helping people. But it says, including water and so on and so on. all of this thing is a blatant lie. And here's how I'm going to prove this to you. This is on the 20th. The reality right now, today forward and all the way back to the beginning, is that they have yet to bring in more fuel. That's been acknowledged by literally everybody. Now we're going to pretend that Kogat just brings in fuel out for the first time since the 7th and delivers it to the hands of Hamas. It says the healthcare system in Gaza has essentially collapsed due to a lack of fuel to operate generators. That is today. But here's another example from Human Rights Watch, also discussing right now. This is on the 19th of March. It says, on October 9th, and if, as you remember, Yoav Gallant, Israel's Minister of Defense, stated, quote, "We are imposing a complete siege on Gaza. No electricity, no food, no water, no fuel. Everything is closed." They're just hoping you don't remember that now because they want you to pretend the opposite's happening. But it says, as of March 19th, Israeli authorities continue to block electricity to Gaza, which we'll show you next, children dying because of that. Israel has also largely continued to block the entry of fuel to Gaza since then. The only power plant in Gaza ran out of fuel reserves by October 11th. They're reporting this 2 days ago. It says, in the absence of electricity, water, wastewater facilities in Gaza became inoperable once there was no fuel available to operate diesel generators. My point is, they haven't brought in more fuel, and almost everybody in this conversation has acknowledged that's one of the primary reasons all of this has collapsed. And then they just pretend to bring in fuel to the place where they're today fighting Hamas. This is how stupid they think we are. And, or alternatively, how actually bad they are at this game. But here is Khaleesi pointing out, Israel is killing babies in the hospital by cutting off power supplies and refusing to let oxygen. Again, you know, the oxygen they pretended it in back where the Red Crescent called them out and said, nope, you actually stole it from us, and then delivered empty containers over and over and over again. It's like the worst kind of possible human being. Human being is generous. The fact that you can lie about something like that, then pretend you're doing the good thing while laughing about how you know they're suffering. It says these 2 babies died due to the power generators at Al-Aqsa Martyr Hospital ceasing as a result of the Israeli blockade. Right, so that's fuel and electricity. Here we are yesterday, while they don't have fuel and these children are dying because of it. That's what's actually going on. I thought I had that. I guess I don't have it on there, but it's just a sad video. These children have died. Now, just to overlap that to make sure you don't forget the Kogat group we're talking about, I've shown you this many times, but here is this guy, Oren Barsky, who continues to lie about stuff to this very day, who was caught by Twitter saying that this is an old video. The bakery in this video was actually bombed and destroyed in October. It's the Al-Nusrat bakery, which was publicly and famously destroyed. There's probably a picture of it right down here. There it is. Destroyed in October. It hasn't been rebuilt. In fact, the entire Al-Nusrat refugee camp has been largely destroyed. But here he was on the 10th of February saying, look at all the food. He literally says, there is no famine in Gaza. You know where he got that from? He got that from Kogat. That's the point. And they were also sharing the same false video that didn't actually. So Kogat, the group, is lying to you. You don't need to look any further. They knowingly made that up to pretend that there wasn't a famine. So here's the same point about this. Well, here's Aviva Klumpa saying, in a surprise to nobody, the IDF found millions of dollars in cash hidden by terrorists in Gaza City Shifa Hospital. Instead of feeding the people of Gaza, Hamas is squandering their aid dollars in terror activities. This is the point I was making earlier. First of all, I think this is an older clip. I'm pretty sure I saw it before, but I wasn't able to confirm that today. This person said the same thing. But if you're talking about because this is about the money they're claiming they found and so on, if we're talking about, oh, actually, you know what, this is the one. So it's this part that I was, the actual green screen part of this. I'm pretty sure I've seen that before, but I could be wrong. Either way, the point is not about the video being old. The point is about the money. They found millions of dollars in cash, they say, like we said, hidden. And then she says, instead of feeding the people of Gaza, they squandered aid dollars. So again, are we actually pretending? Is Aviva that stupid, or that thinks we're that stupid to argue that they're given billions of cash, millions in cash, and that they're then going to go buy things? Where exactly is Hamas to buy aid in Gaza? Like, do you not realize how completely hollow that argument is? There's nowhere for them to go buy the aid, because that's why it needs to be delivered, because they don't have it. That's why 500 aid trucks at a minimum were coming in before October 7th, and they were still food insecure. If you gave them cash, that's because Israel was buying their allegiance and giving them money to buy weapons with, which is the actual reality, which is why I talk about arming them. I just think that is painful. Am I the only one that I think the point is that everybody is beginning to highlight this kind of absurdity because, before this October 7th conversation, people were afraid called anti-Semites. That has lost its allure, its power. So now it's like, well, that's just stupid. What you just said is logically incorrect. But in case the point is to, if you forgot this point of it, the reason I'm saying this is because it's a provable fact. Here's WikiLeaks highlighting WikiLeaks cable Israeli intelligence chief encouraged Hamas takeover of the Gaza Strip. WikiLeaks that's never been shown to produce something that's been shown to be false. Israeli intelligence encouraged Hamas to take over. Why? The same point we've always told you. Oh, I don't, that's funny. I didn't even bring that one up, even though I brought that up a zillion times. I might as well grab it. Which is where is it? Right. Hold on. New browser, so it comes up differently. Here we go. As we, at the same point, we've always told you that that's a public statement or made public by Haaretz from 2019, 2 days after October 7th, which if it was anybody else, they would have been called racist for doing so, simply pointing out the truth. He said, anyone that wants to thwart the two-state solution that we pretend we want, that's me paraphrasing, but that's what he's saying, thwart the establishment of a Palestinian state, has to support bolstering Hamas by transferring money to them. And this is the conversation here, where they literally sent the Mossad chief to Qatar to petition them to continue. And from this point forward, they got billions of dollars in cash. That's the whole point. Where do you think this is aid involved? This is about exactly what you think it is. They are supporting their terrorism in order to use that as the reason they do not allow a two-state solution. Here's a video that I already showed you about that point, just to cap it off.
Hamas to try to prevent a Palestinian state.
Yeah, sure.
That's the former prime minister of Israel.
He deliberately and systematically even told, is on record, whoever wants to avoid the threat of a two-state solution has to support my policy of paying protection money to the Hamas.
So what we did,
protection money. I mean, really think for a second about how you can argue October 7th is all because Palestinians are evil or they support them without acknowledging the fact that Israel made them what they are in order to use them to make sure you could say Palestinians are evil. And then not come back and realize that how can you say they're evil if you know that he made that happen? At the very least, of like the Michael Rappaports of the world and the people that I keep dumping that in front of, you have to go, hold on a second. At the very least, I need to be very concerned about what my government's allowing to happen. You can still pretend you hate Palestinians, for a similar reason why you can say that maybe even though it's false, maybe it's influenced the way they think. I mean, however you want to argue it, but you have to acknowledge that the Israeli government is responsible for all of it, which includes October 7th.
the permission of our Prime Minister is to let Qatar to transfer a huge amount of money in cash, probably more than $1.4 billion. By doing it, we increase the power of Hamas. We did everything in order to make sure that Hamas will go on controlling Gaza, and Palestinian Authority will control the West Bank, so they will fight each other.
Yes. Which, by the way, is why they now say, oh, they're a terrorist group, they're a terrorist group. That's the way it's designed. So they can always argue that both of them are at odds with what they believe, and it's all about divide and conquer, manufacturing a justification to pretend that they're the bad guy when you're the one causing the bad things.
Netanyahu maintains the Qatar money was to avoid a humanitarian catastrophe. Having helped to build up Hamas, Netanyahu has now vowed to destroy it.
And ultimately, the point is that you're not going to help humanitarian aid by giving them cash. Again, same point. Where exactly are you supposed to get aid from within an area that necessitates delivery of aid to be able to get what you want? There's not Amazon deliveries, guys. That's not how this works. So just so we're clear about this, it's not just Al-Shifa or any isolated situation here, as much as a lot of people are kind of trying to argue right now. No, it's getting blown out of proportion. It's only certain pockets and everything else is fine. It's not what's going on. This whole place is an absolute, I don't want to say literally everything's been destroyed. That's not necessarily the case, but it has been absolutely decimated. all of Gaza is completely shut down at this point, and people are living. I mean, I don't even know how people are surviving at this point in many of these areas, especially like the north. But he writes, the situation in West Gaza City is catastrophic. This is Yunus Tarawi. He says the Israeli military has cleansed entire Ramal neighborhood. According to a friend in the ground, the number of dead bodies strewn across the streets is unprecedented, surpassing even the impact of the first invasion. All children from 14 to 18 and men are kidnapped. Cases of women arrests have also been recorded. Elderly women and children were forced under gun threat to walk South Gaza, leaving their homes. I mean, just text on Twitter, so you should question it like anything else. But the point is, his reporting has been consistently accurate based on what's been going on, and the fact that we just went over the other data points that also align with what he just said in Al-Shifa and elsewhere. This is what they've been doing. Here is Asnaf Rano adding to another point that goes back to the beginning of this, at least post October 7th, showing you yet again that one of the claims that just like every other one of the like Ali Hospital and all these, I mean, even going back to the convoy from the Flower Massacre, where Elon Levy got caught leading a tweet that he said a lie. They keep doing this. The point is that this is something we called out then. Whether we're talking about the Al Jazeera journalists that were killed in Lebanon or the examples of many other journalists that were targeted. Here, it says senior Israeli journalists hurried to justify the execution of Palestinian journalists in Gaza by their army 2 months ago. Today, this is the 20th of March, the Washington Post reveals that the Palestinian journalists were executed to prevent them from publishing documentation of the Israeli army war crimes. Now, he's speaking as our army's war crimes. Like, he's speaking from Israel. Right? This is former Haaretz writer. Drone footage raises questions about Israeli justification for deadly strike on Gaza journalists, which is their typical watered-down name. If you read the article, the point is that just what they claimed is clearly not the reality. So now there's questions about what it could have been. Now, instead of framing it as we don't know why it happens, the point is there's no justification. Not that there may be something we can't identify. That's how these corporate platforms still toe the line, even when they're calling something out. The reality is the drone footage shows that they killed these people without the justification that they claimed. They're not Hamas members. They're not human shields. They killed these people because they're journalists. And that goes back as far as you want to look. There's people on the record from Israeli media, both media actually, and government saying that they've been ordered to do this. There's journals on the record saying they were ordered to kill children. Here's Quds News Network highlighting another example like this. Graphic footage. This came out today. Al Jazeera publishes exclusive footage from an Israeli drone that was shot down by the resistance in Gaza. That's how they got the footage, revealing Israeli drones deliberately targeting Palestinian civilians, which is what we just talked about. Shouldn't be that hard to wrap your mind around. The Israeli forces, utilizing the drones, continuously followed the Palestinians as they were migrating south, which they're told to do, shooting at them, resulting in the deaths of 3 and the injury of 2 who attempted to escape but were pursued and then killed. Oh, I think it was just here. Because the background is not really, it's just not in English. Now, the bottom line is that these people are walking, and there's no narrative, there's no claim that they were Hamas. These people, this is one of a million, I shouldn't say that, one of a lot of people that are killed in Gaza right now by Israeli forces that nobody talks about, that there's no narrative around, there's no media coverage. Every moment right now, whether they're dying of starvation, dying of thirst, dying of any number of other problems, or being bombed, shot at, it's only when they're forced to acknowledge, like the Al-Shifa discussion, because people are paying attention, that they make up a narrative. This, you're not, now that it's been highlighted, I bet you there's going to be a narrative put to it. That's the whole reactive propaganda we've seen so far. But these are just people walking. In fact, going, according to Al Jazeera, in the direction that they were told to go, which, by the way, is also something that we've all seen repeatedly happen. I mean, Amnesty International has proven, Human Rights Watch has proven that I'll even bring up next the article from Haaretz, citing a New York Times investigation where they are choosing to bomb the safe areas or the areas on the way there after they tell them to go there. This is just like clockwork, guys. They're just murdering Palestinians. It's crazy. So the point is just the person ultimately, believing they're not, got away, I guess. They just bomb again. I mean, is there any indication these are Hamas members? They're not dressed like that. The guy's wearing sandals, for God's sakes. It does. The point is, it doesn't matter. All they have to say is, well, our intelligence says, just like the U.S. government does these days. And the U.S. government will toe that line. Now, here is Adil Haku, or Hawk. Not familiar. Looks like he's a Rutgers Law editor for Just Security. Highlighting what the New Yorker says. It says, this is the biggest cohort of pediatric amputees in history. The fact that we can even talk about things like this and act like this all makes sense is beyond me. The biggest cohort of pediatric amputees. My God. A reconstructive surgeon who specializes in pediatric trauma said of the record number of children who have been injured in the war on Gaza. Not human shields, just byproducts of their bombing campaigns. UNICEF estimates that 1,000 children in Gaza have become amputees since the beginning. And sadly enough, grotesquely enough, most of them without anesthetic. Because that went away real early in this conversation. Think about that for a second. Let that sink in, that these are children. What if it was your child? What if it was your daughter, your son, your cousin, your niece? They were children. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 children, guys, and they're losing an arm, a leg, and they have to remove these things, whatever's left, without anesthesia. And then hoping that they don't die without everything else they need to make sure they don't, antibiotics. I mean, there's so many levels to this. It's torture. Now, another angle, by the way, is the West Bank, which really begins to show people that this is not just about Hamas. Here's Nam pointing out Ben-Gvir, one of the religious Zionism party, these extremist Zionists, extreme Zionist minister Itmar Ben-Gvir boasts the 100,000th settler has now obtained a weapon since the start of the war. Yeah, that's not a joke. Ben-Gvir celebrates issuing 100,000 gun licenses since October 7th. You're literally arming civilians? This is madness. And these are people that are known to be extreme, even by their own government. And the point is, it says putting more weapons on the streets has made Israel safer. Isn't that hilariously stupid? Now, I'm not even saying because you may agree that is the reality in a general sense. I'm not saying one way or the other. What I'm saying, this is the supposedly liberal government of the Israel, the only democracy in the Middle East that literally aligns itself with mostly. Well, I mean, what's funny about it is it right now seems to be a largely right-leaning in the sense of our government of the United States, but historically, right, the Democrat side of this aligning with, they're LGBTQ, even though it's not true. They support gay marriage, even though it's not true. It's all these lies they make up about Israel. How about the fact that your entire premise about what's going on in the U.S. is that guns need to be less, that guns in the hands of everybody is more danger, that guns in the hands of teachers. Well, here is that government going, guns everywhere makes us safer. It's just so stupid how many lies we've been told about what this is and how they omit and they're, the double standards, the hypocrisy. What does that show you? It has to show you at the very least that these people are invested in Israel for reasons completely separate than what they're actually telling you. Or they're compromised for reasons that they're not telling you. Because these things are like embarrassing contradictions, right? I mean, defending, like this is the argument about any number of things about the extremist nature of what they're doing and then acting like they're part of some rules-based international order. It's embarrassing. Here is just a breakdown from the cradle. Israel approves 100,000 gun licenses since October 7th, and these settlers are extreme. They have been behind some of the worst parts of what's been going on outside of just the mass genocide. UN experts alarmed by the rise in settler violence in occupied Palestinian territories. That is from November 2021. So in case you thought this was some new thing because bad guys on October 7th, you're wrong. They have been extremely violent and extremely, they're racist, guys. They're openly bigoted toward these people, and they openly express that everywhere you look. It's been ignored, at least until now. But the point is, it goes all the way to the day too, and it's gotten exponentially worse since October 7th. UN Human Rights Chief deplores new moves to expand Israeli settlements. This is about the idea that these are illegal. Nobody argues otherwise. And everybody ignores it, other than certain people that make articles like this, but the UN largely ignores it. The United States doesn't say a word, even though they would otherwise argue it's illegal. As even Blinken kind of walked back the ridiculous Pompeo statement about how they're in line with international law, however that makes sense. It just shows you how willfully blind they are to what they want to achieve for Israel they're contradicting the things they pretend are sacred, the law and rights, and they don't care, guys, because they don't care about them in any sense. They're tools they use to emotionally manipulate you. Doesn't mean they don't matter, mind you. We should care about these things. That's why they use them, because they know you want good. They're not good, is the point. They are forcing in illegal settlements, and your government doesn't care. That's mass displacement. That is everything that is wrong with what we're dealing with here. Here's the New Yorker, the Israeli settlers attacking their Palestinian neighbors. Here's Vox. This is from February 28th, 2023. So before October 7th, but right up to it in 2023 anyway. How the Israeli settler rampage was emboldened by the new far-right government. Yep, not new. Now here are some current examples. This is Nablus, as he frames it, Nakba 2024. The community made of 10 families who have been on their own lands for decades has now been displaced from the area following Israeli settler attacks. Nobody cares about this. There's all sorts of reasons in every possible way, whether it's just a general person-to-person dynamic, or whether it's actual international law, whether it's even Israeli law. None of it matters when it's settlers attacking Palestinians. They ignore everything. It's public. I mean, it's embarrassingly and insultingly public. Look to Abby Martin and people that have covered this for years. Their own court system acknowledges they just disregard Palestinians in so many different ways. Now they've been displaced from their lands. As I spoke with a resident there, we can't take it anymore, they said. An Israeli settler built an outpost a week ago, and when they started to call the military out on the residents, they cut off the water cables in the village and film them. 5 families were forced to leave. So the Israeli military just went, oh yeah, we got you. We'll cut the water. What else you need? You think these people are not complicit? Like that's acknowledging they want this, even though they're illegal settlers, guys. These are not, just because they've given them some level of official capacity since October 7th, everything about this is against the law. 2 days ago, Israeli settlers, along with the Israeli military, raided the community, which is always how this goes. Forced them from their land and then acted like it's their fault for being there. Why? Because Palestinians are Hamas, or whatever they want you to believe. Israeli drones bombed 2 West Bank cities within 24 hours. Right? So we're talking about the 2 people that were just killed in that car, which as far as I could tell were civilians based on everything we can see and prove, other than Israel saying otherwise. Oh, but they had some pictures where they were holding a gun. So we must know that they're Hamas. I guess that makes half of this country Hamas, right? It's a stupid thing to argue. Bottom line, they're bombing the West Bank. I don't know why that's not shocking for people. Now, Hen Mazig steps in with a really just classically Zionist, hypocritical. That's funny. Hypocritical double standard. Now, I have yet to be able to flesh this out. I was actually going to reach out to some people tomorrow to kind of see what actually happened here, because I got this sort of towards the end of my research today. Either way, it's certainly possible what he says is true. But we should be very sure that what we should be doing, no matter what, right now is a huge grain of salt with anything coming from Zionist, anything. And that's just because of how many times they've already been caught lying. The same thing applied to the Ukraine conversation. You should be objective always, but realize that if they've been lying and been caught that many times, you acknowledge that fact when you do your research. But it says Palestinian Islamic Jihad. Again, my point is they're going to keep pointing to that. They want that to be a secondary goal. Broke into a hospital in Jenin. Interesting, Jenin, right? The place where that kid, again, they were young, not children, but young adolescents, and they were not provably Hamas, where they were assassinated in that car, which, by the way, bombed the car right next to them, which were provably civilians, so they don't care about it in general, and kidnapped an alleged collaborator, which is interesting. Now, I don't know the truth of this just yet, but my point is, first of all, you can, as other people are already pointing out down there, it's pretty easy to show what Israelis have done in the past with what they argue are collaborators. It's pretty grotesque, but either way, the point for me is you're saying that they went into a hospital, which is sacred, and took somebody out of their hospital bed. And as he said, the international media is silent. And they killed them, of course, is what we're being told. You mean like this? You mean like the hospital raid conducted by undercover Israeli commandos where they went in and murdered 3 people in their beds, which they claim were Hamas, but I've never seen that proven. That's what happened. They went in dressed like women and elderly and went in and shot people in their beds. So look, you could argue if you're going to argue one of them is acceptable, then the other one's acceptable. But of course, that's not how this works for them. The point is that this should not be happening in hospitals either way, whether it's Palestinian or Israeli. But the Israeli government has the same thing the U.S. government does around the world. You can't hoist all the rules on the people you're fighting and then not follow any of them yourselves and expect them to act accordingly, or not act and not expect them to act accordingly. Either way, I will look into this more because I think it's important that we acknowledge that if, first of all, Islamic Jihad killed this person because they spoke to Israel, and realized that the argument is that he's the reason that they were able to bomb those people in that car. Not to say that it justifies him being murdered, but it's interesting to see that this is a discussion of an ongoing war, and we can see Israeli side being similar. This is what we've already seen happen to Palestinians and Israelis alike. Ask any kind of person speaking out about Zionism right now in Israel. But either way, I think it's really ridiculous to pretend like this is outrage. Nobody's speaking about it, when in reality, there's a lot of people speaking about it, but also that we disregard the same thing in reverse. The truth, what we need to acknowledge, guys, is I guarantee you there's people in Hamas that are horrible. I guarantee there's people in any of these groups that are bad people. That's not to say that it's because of the groups. It could be, but it's because you could probably prove that with anything. I'm willing to bet you there's someone listening to this show that's a bad person. I'm willing to bet you that you can set aside any 5 people and be like, I bet you there's a really bad person in there. That's just because it's human species. There's going to be somebody that you don't agree with or that you perceive as being bad. Now, I shouldn't be that specific. Who knows if it's 5 or 100? My point is that you can easily say that there's that what you're looking at, whether it's Islamic Jihad killing this guy because they don't like what he said, or any number of things Israel's claiming. It should not be the argument that that's never anywhere. The point is that you have to prove these things in order to conduct yourself the way that you're claiming you are, which is a rules-based international order or the only democracy in the Middle East. But they never do that. In fact, they show you that they're the ones leading the charge, both U.S. and Israel, when it comes to demonstrating what real terrorism looks like. Here is the Times of Israel showing you the West Bank again. This goes back to October 20th. So early after October 7th, IDF and settlers bind, strip, beat, burn, and urinate on 3 Palestinians in the West Bank, which it's very provable. And the reality is this should think about what they're doing to all the rest of them. And then they come out and say, oh, they all surrendered. Well, these weren't surrendering Hamas members. These were simply people that they didn't like, and the settlers did this to them. The same thing you're seeing happen over here, but they claim it's all Hamas. Or is it? I think it's obvious. Here's The Guardian. This is from February 22nd of 2024. Claims of Israeli sexual assault of Palestinian women are credible, the UN panel says, which of course really bothered the Zionists because they're stressing a completely baseless allegation about all these rape corpses and children and whatever else and dogs and trees and raping everything. No evidence other than suggestive points that have now been wildly, mostly debunked. But on this side of it, you've got decades and decades and decades of testimony and pictures and I mean, UN investigations and Amnesty and Human Rights Watch. And the point is, this is post-October 7th. And they very clearly are finding that this is credible because it is. And that's just the point is it's outrageous. How dare you only care about what they say because the evidence is not, it's not equivalent. So just recognizing that here we are with enough evidence for it to very clearly be something that's been ongoing for a long time. The State Department person who resigned after October 7th is on the record telling you that. Remember that. He's the one that said that he brought it to their attention that this group was raping these children. What did they do? Well, they went in and shut down the group that was exposing it and labeled them a terrorist organization. That's a true story. Now, talking about these rape allegations, this is a new thread put out by The Squirrel, which is actually it's a really important thing to watch. And we've talked about the Zaka group, this one in particular guy that has been lying, that even Haaretz has called out, which I'll grab right now. Here's a video we're going to show you. Oh, hold on. I forgot this is the, let's see what this is. Not that one. This one's actually important too. Oh, look at that. Look at that. It says blocked. Did they really just? That is hilarious. Why? Because we keep looking at these articles or everybody's blocked. I don't know. That's interesting. Let me do this so I can show you what that is now that they blocked it. Hold on. There we go. Oh, it says blocked on the URL too. Look at that. That's crazy. Let me do this. Grab the link. 1 second. Bear with me. I'm interested about what this is. Or, or rather that I want you guys to see one of the things that appears they don't want people to see. I don't know why that would be blocked right now, but here's the actual article. This is why we use the Wayback Machine. So here's the one they just didn't want you to see, apparently. And when you translate it, this one's also important. Remember, Hamas did not know in advance of the Nova Festival. This one simply says it also emerges that the helicopter pilots fired on the Nova Festival people. That is important. I wonder why they don't want you to see it. But then there was this one too. Let's see. I'm going to guess this one. Yep. There we go. Let's see if this one gets blocked too. Doesn't look like it. And this is the important one. Just simply showing you the Hebrew version, which is much more clear, that what Zaka, that one guy in particular, was saying. And they actually specifically, you got to put it on the Wayback Machine. It's on the paywall. But put it on the Wayback Machine. We'll go through it before. We've gone through it many times. It shows very clearly that they lied about the rape allegations, about the baby in the or the baby in the stomach being cut out, the baby in the oven. Provably false stories, which I shouldn't even need to convince people these days. If every group, including corporate media, have been like, yeah, those weren't really true. And yet he still keeps pushing these arguments. Here he is interviewing with Al Jazeera, I think. And I mean, you tell me what you think. To me, this has got to be one of the most obvious examples. And this is the level of evidence 5 months later that they're still putting forward. Here's a picture of a bloody room that I can't identify. That proves what I'm saying? No, it doesn't. In fact, it today makes you more questionable.
The list of the dead shows 2 12-year-old twins are killed when police and army stormed the house in Be'eri. But there are no other children.
It was an interview we did with Sky Television from Britain. 2 piles, we found them in Bury. 2 piles of 10 children each were tied back to back and burned to death. Now again, I mean, if we look at the death figures at Bury, there are only 10 children that died at Bury.
Well, not children, it's 18-year-old. So we all together, when you look at them and they're burned, you don't know exactly the ages. So you're talking about 18-year-old, 20 years old, and you just don't look on the spot identification to see the ages or something like that.
What? I mean, come on, guys. Like, does that in any way strike you as somebody being genuine? The whole thing. And it only gets worse, but I'm just going based off just mannerisms, the lack of, I mean, to me, that screams somebody who's just kind of like, I don't even know how to describe that. It's not giving you an answer. That's kind of just like, oh, well, just that has, I would put it like this. Somebody who is not used to being pushed back on. You state it and people go, oh, that's crazy and that's serious. Instead, they go, but can I see some evidence? And the way he responds is very telling.
It is not the only questionable story that Yossi Landau tells about Kibbutz Be'eri.
Don't forget, all of these things are false. Everything he just said and what he's about to say crying is provably a false story. Nobody other than Israel, and even some people there, nobody other than a few people in Israel are claiming this stuff is true anymore.
We go further.
I'm sorry, I shouldn't say it. A few people that support Israel, not just in Israel.
The only questionable story that Yossi Landau tells about Kibbutz Be'eri.
We go further. Then we see a woman. She was lying on the floor, a puddle of blood, big puddle of blood. She was a pregnant woman. Her stomach was butchered open. The baby that was connected to the cord was stabbed, and she was shot in the back.
Kibbutz Be'eri has denied this account.
The story of the pregnant woman reported by Zaka is not relevant to Be'eri.
Yossi Landau insists he witnessed this scene at Be'eri.
If you want to see the picture, I have the picture of it.
Are you able to share the photographic evidence
Yes,
with us?
to show you. Yes. Where's my phone? Oh, I'm sorry. I will not put it in front of the
No,
camera.
no, that's fine. I'll come and look.
This is the knife they used.
Shot and killed, but
Over here was the woman.
But that's the imagery after the bodies had been cleared away. Oh.
Yes. This is the baby.
This is creepy.
This is
to me.
it.
I'm sorry to be graphic here, but I can't see a baby here.
You can't see the baby but this is the picture of the mother.
My God.
For sure, you know, we didn't think when we over there, we didn't think to camera everything. We didn't have that. This wasn't in our.
Oh, what, you mean evidence? You didn't think to take evidence while you were conducting evidence? Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, right? I mean, that's disgusting. Everything about what he's doing right there is giving me the chills how creepy that is. Like, I mean, you're not going to show the camera. And by the way, we've seen what he's showing. It's that one image of that weird piece of what looks like human flesh. They circulated it for a minute. It's like the burnt piece of flesh. That's it. And that's supposed to be proof of a woman's stomach being cut open that you claim, oh, I've got the picture, I can show you. He probably didn't expect him to go, yeah, let me see. And you get up and show him something that you can know. By the way, again, this didn't happen. So that means he knows this didn't happen. He knows he's lying about it. And he knows that he's basically putting forward claims that will later be used to murder people in Gaza. I mean, it really makes me sick that this is even happening. And meanwhile, literally, most everybody has already acknowledged this is fake, and it kind of just keeps zombie walking forward. I mean, here, let me finish. Watch the way he just kind of trails off. Doesn't really give an answer, but because he doesn't push back, he just goes, oh, good. The guy, she's not even pushing anymore. Just stops. Watch.
But that's the imagery after the bodies had been cleared away. Oh.
Yes.
Yes.
This is the baby.
No, it's not.
This is it.
I'm sorry to be graphic here, but I can't see a baby here.
And by the way, all he said is the baby was stabbed, right? That was the story. But yet now it's just this gross piece of flesh. Well, you said you had a picture of the mother, which you don't. I guess that's only the baby. It's all ridiculous.
You can't see the baby but this is the picture of the mother. Okay.
So
For sure.
What I mean, he just said that was the baby.
but
Over here was the woman.
But that's the imagery after the bodies had been cleared away. Oh.
Yes. This is the baby.
He says, this is the baby. Shows him that gross picture.
This is it.
I'm sorry to be graphic here, but I can't see a baby here.
You can't see the baby but this is the picture of the mother.
You just said it was the baby. Now it's the picture of the mother? I mean, this guy, you think this person would be better at lying about this, seeing as how he's been roundly lying about this story since the beginning.
Okay.
For sure, you know, we didn't think when we over there, we didn't think to camera everything. We didn't have that. This wasn't in our.
Wow. That's it?
The photo shows an unidentifiable piece of charred flesh. The list of the dead contains no victim that fits Yossi Landau's description. On October 7th, 2 babies die. One is killed when a bullet is fired through a door. The other dies following an emergency cesarean after the mother is shot. Neither is burned or beheaded.
And realize the kibbutz Be'eri, that's where that one child was killed. Shot through the door. For all we know, that was the IDF, which also happened. But the point is, that means there was no 40 beheaded babies. That means, because these are kibbutz Be'eri discussions, that means there was no 15 babies on a clothesline. That means there was no beheaded children. None of that is real, based on their own information from in the area. That's also the point that kibbutz Be'eri people said, we weren't raped. The explicit people they pointed to, the 3 examples, they said didn't happen. And yes, this just keeps going. Here's one of the people interviewing him, pretending it's real without pushback, and that's how this keeps going.
You being someone who, with your own hands, with your own eyes, with your nose, you smelled this.
Disgusting.
What would you say to that person who is downplaying what took place here?
Listen to this.
I wouldn't say anything. I would ask please give me, he should be together with the Hamas terrorist and he should be killed.
Wow. These are some disgusting people. Guys, these are villains. Not because they're Israeli, not because they're Jewish, not because of anything other than the fact that they're acting like villains. That's just horrifying to me. Now, I just want to reiterate this one more time. This is a powerful point, at least for me. Tell me if I'm wrong. Just as a student, I just, personally, I enjoy, people watching. I like decide, sussing out what I think people are doing, what they are, just reading their body language. This is one of the most red flag examples that if I was in this interview, I wouldn't have let that go. The way that he doesn't finish his sentence, which is about well, how do you explain that? Well, we didn't have him to think to take the pictures of the, and just sits down and is well, okay, he's not really asking, he's letting it go. So I'm going to let this go. So I don't have to look like I'm lying. I mean, wow. It makes me uncomfortable almost.
But over here was the woman.
But that's
Baby. This is it.
I'm sorry to be graphic here, but I can't see a baby here.
You can't see the baby but this is the picture of the mother.
Okay.
For sure, we didn't think when we over there, we didn't think to camera everything. We didn't have that. This wasn't in our.
Wow. Right?
The photo
guys, to me, that is more powerful. Just me personally. It's not, provable, but from my personal opinion, that sways me more than just about everything else. You guys can decide for yourselves. Here is Bata Ungar Sargon, an editor for Newsweek, saying, just towing the line. I just heard testimony tonight from a Nova Festival survivor who escaped. Now, by the way, what she heard was the repetition of what she's told is the survivor's testimony. Not that this person said they saw it, because that doesn't exist. I heard testimony tonight from a Nova Festival survivor who escaped and hid from the terrorists in a bike shop bathroom in Be'eri. Now, I would point out that there have been the people like this that have said they heard this, or they heard, I was in a bush and I heard the sounds of what was right. Not a single person anywhere 5 months later has actually come forward with evidence this happened other than secondhand testimony, or I heard something that said. It's crazy to me. And this is how it keeps going. Somebody somewhere got enough, pressure or suggestive, in making this person stand up and go, I heard this, even though this is the same thing we've heard repeated over and over and over, and then reposted a new article, and then another article is written and cites that article. It's the recycling of the same stories. It says, on the other hand, or on the other side of the door, she heard Hamas torturing people for hours. Men, women, children, elderly. She heard people screaming, people begging for their lives. She heard women being raped in a very long time. Again, the point from before. Somehow they're magically able to completely take over these areas from Israel, completely secure. Good thing they were gang raping. Otherwise, they would have taken over the whole area. Even though there's literally no evidence of any of this, people they're claiming were gang raped in mass. We're saying that didn't happen. Caboose Be'eri and the rest of them. If we're being told that they were gang raping corpses and everything, and you're telling us you don't have a single shred of forensic or any other evidence other than secondhand testimony, guys, we have to laugh at how dumb that is. It says she heard people screaming, people begging for their lives. When she emerged from the bathroom, meaning she didn't see any of this, there were body parts everywhere. I mean, and then let's not forget that we know that they were bombing with their fire missiles and tanks in the house and shooting people, including their own people. That has been admitted to by literally everybody. I don't mean every single person, but I mean every category. People that were there, tank drivers, helicopter pilots, colonels in the military. I mean, every angle has admitted they saw it, or were watching, or, that this is their policy, or that they were involved in the cars when they were going to Gaza. Now they came back as a hostage and said, yes, they shot at us and they also bombed us while we were there, over and over and over. So now what you get is testimony from someone who claims they heard something, who then gets relayed by an IDF member in front of a bunch of journalists, who then says, I heard testimony from this. That is journalism today. And realize all the evidence we've broken down since the beginning continues to show you that this is completely flimsy. On top of the fact that, let's just say she did see all these body parts. How do we know what actually caused that? And the Dirty Boulevard simply highlights what we've already been showing you. He said, do you know what I heard? The IDF arrived and started to kill Israelis, which is, by the way, what these Israelis will tell you.
וכבר בצומת אתה רואה שם שברי מכוניות ואזור קרב.
כדי לתאר לך את הסיטואציה, אתה יושב בקיבוץ בתוך מדינת ישראל, שאני מטייל שם בשבתות עם הילדים באופניים. אתה כל דקה יורד עליך טיל, כל דקה. פתאום אתה רואה טיל ממסוק שיורה לתוך הקיבוץ.
For the podcast, he's just simply saying that they saw these helicopters fire into the kibbutz. And this is while there were civilians. That's been a proven reality. People like Yasmin Poret has been one of the most prominent witnesses. But these are IDF members, colonels, tank drivers, even the security head of Kibbutz Beret. He's one of those main testimony, one of the main examples of testimony telling us that they fired on civilians.
אבל לא הבנתי. מסוק צה"לי יורה לתוך קיבוץ ישראלי, ואז אתה רואה טנק נוסע ברחובות הקיבוץ, מצודד את התותח ויורה לפגז לתוך בית. זה דברים שאתה לא מצליח להבין, ואז פתאום אתה קולט בצד ימין מאות אנשים מהקיבוץ.
ואנשים, ילדים על הידיים, בלי נעליים, אנשים שברחו. התחושה שלי הייתה שהגענו כמו חייל אמריקאי שמגיע ב-15 לאפריל 1945 לברגן בלזן. מין פליטות כזאת.
באיזה שלב מאוד מהיר אמרנו, רגע, מישהו צריך להוציא את חבר'ה האלה מפה, כי זה לא הגיוני.
Right, basically saying, wait, we gotta get the people out of the way, which didn't happen, by the way.
כי נופלים טילים.
Because missiles are flying down and we're shooting while there are civilians in the way. That's what he's talking about.
אזור מלחמה. עכשיו בסוף הם יצאו מהגיהנום הזה בתוך הקיבוץ.
At the end, they got out of the hell. They got out of that hell inside of the kibbutz, but many of them did not, as testimony left and right from people that were there continue to tell you. The real point to take away is there's no reason that they should have been subjected to that possibility in the first place. That's the reality. But the Israeli government does not care about this. They don't care about the Israelis. They don't care about the Palestinians. That's self-evident.
יחטפו טיל בכניסה לקיבוץ, כי מה? כי הם מחכים למי? זה לא היה נראה לנו הגיוני בתור הורים לילדים.
It doesn't make sense to us as parents and children. And this is why, guys, that these people, like we were just talking yesterday, Dan Cohen shared that there's a mass issue in the Israeli military. Haaretz is writing about it. You're not going to hear about it in Western press because that'll make Israel look bad, and they won't dare to do that in many cases. But Haaretz is telling you that there's an issue right now with people leaving in mass from the IDF. Gee, I wonder why.
למדנו את כל הרכבים של היחידה. פשוט התחלנו ביוזמה להעמיס את האנשים כמה שאפשר לדחוס אותם ברכבים ולנסוע איתם לאנשהו מחוץ לאזור הלחימה.
Now, this is Uncapped Media. This is Dan Cohen platform. Make sure you check it out. They've done a lot of great work. Him and Propaganda & Co. as well have done great breakdown videos of the propaganda, the lies, the Hannibal Directive. So in regard to the rape allegations in general, right, because what we're ultimately talking about is this rape allegation and you know, who actually killed whom. Whom. So the point would be here, Haaretz broke this down. Again, March 20th, guys, and just continue to highlight how Haaretz, as much as they've come out with things that I think I disagree with during this, that they're Israeli mainstream media. They're highlighting these lies. Now, this is, and in regard, actually, I take this back. In this case, they're not. My point is that Haaretz is an important aspect of this, that in some cases is coming out showing you the truth. And even then, that's being denied. I just think that's a fascinating overlap. But here they say the Israeli prize in the field of solidarity will be awarded to Dr. Kokav Elkalim Levy, if I'm saying that correctly, or El-Kayam Levy, who raised awareness of Hamas's sexual gender-based violence against Israelis on October 7th. Not to say that that's even a real thing, but she sure as hell raised awareness to it. And the point is that Mondoweiss broke this down as like, you know, the rest of it. And even, by the way, Haaretz has broken down, these are lies, which is hilarious to me that they're pointing at that. The CNN report began with an interview with Kokav El-Kayam Levy, or El-Kayam Levy. She is identified as an expert in humanitarian rights, or human rights law, who organized a civil committee to document evidence. The speaker is indeed an expert, but of course not of human rights law, which is probably the point is that she probably just introduced herself that way, or Israel did, and they just went with it because that's what CNN and corporate media does in many, many cases. Either they didn't choose to check it, which they've done. They've been caught for huge examples of that before, where people end up on their show that turn out not even to be what they say they are. It's like, how do you not do that basic due diligence? In her former positions, and we've talked about this, including a post for the Israeli government's Attorney General office in the International Law Department, she in fact provided the legal justification for Israeli soldiers to commit violations against Palestinians. She had previously published, quote, a guidance for policymaking, government officials, and legal advisors in the management of hunger strikes. Literally provided a detailed legal manual on how to force feed Palestinians who were hunger striking in order to push back in protest. That's disgusting. In the same year, Israel legalized and regulated the force feeding law that she outlined to oppress and torture Palestinian prisoners. Now, realize, by the way, guys, that's not just in cases where they're choosing not to eat. There's examples where that's done to torture, just to torture. Now, yet CNN considered it appropriate to bring her as a human rights expert, even though that's not the case. In her interview, and the real point is to try to flavor what she is in regard to change the light around the lie she spread about the rape allegations. In her interview, which opens the CNN report, Levy presents nothing but justifications for the absence of evidence and facts. Feel free to watch it. We've already gone over this ad nauseum. While Levy claims to speak under the auspices of the Civil Committee, CNN hides the tight connections between her and the National Security Council for the Israeli Prime Minister. Clearly not compromised at all, or at the very least, it's not objective if you're working for the group that is literally making the claims that are being investigated, is also the director of the Devora Institute, which works as a close advisory body to the Prime Minister. It says the advisory committee for the Devora Institute includes a former director of the Israeli Prime Minister's office and 3 former officials for the National Security Council. Clearly not compromised. And I put down here, and she's also provably lied about what was seen. And I have that right here. And we've already gone over this. I'm not going to take too much time on it. The point was from before that this Max Blumenthal actually caught this in regard to the website that was using the image that we have proven is from 2022. It's an old image that is at least from 2022. This is the Wayback Machine. The link is right here. You can check it for yourself. The point is that was posted on this, which Israel government did endorse, and then it was quietly deleted, showing that they were aware it was not accurate, but they kept using it. Here she is. Max caught this, where she was using this image publicly in her presentation about rape. And this was this is at the end of 2023. And it's crazy how they keep, and Max even posted this, proved it to her, and she said, thank you for highlighting that you're didn't even care. Just let it keep going. And what's interesting is Twitter keeps deleting this, which, by the way, they just did again when I posted it beneath this. Here's Cuts News Network highlighting the execution of 140 Palestinians in Al-Shifa. This person goes, by quote, Palestinians, you mean these Palestinians? For the podcast, what you're seeing is a weird, gross cartoon that says 7/10/23 with fire. It shows I guess supposed to be a Palestinian holding a gun and a child in his arms. And then on the ground, a cartoon version of that woman. Guys, this is posted 14 hours ago. You see my point about how this is actually still being used? That is what you're looking at. That's that picture right there. And I said, here is that actual image that you all keep using. Only problem, it's from 2022. Oops. But something tells me that won't stop you from using this fake cartoon. That, I guarantee you, look around. It's probably all over Twitter now. And that image that you're looking at, that is the same thing that you've heard. There's that earlier guy in the beginning who claimed he saw that woman, and that quietly disappeared when it became clear that was an old image, but it's still around. It's the same. You're seeing people pretend that's real over and over and over. This woman, Levy, using it to pretend that it's real. I mean, I don't think we need more to prove that this whole thing is based on flimsy allegations. Oh, and this was just them. I'm showing you that they flagged this. You know how many things are just over the top graphic right now that they don't even care about. But of course, I post an image that is disgusting, but is a fraction of the kind of graphic we keep seeing. But of course, as I'll show you, they put this warning on it. You can't see it now, but here's the warning, which limits the visibility, which most people won't see. It ends up being behind a thing, and they can't let the click to see it. Why they do that? Because this is about suppressing the truth about what's going on. That's what I believe, truly. And that's what it says right here. We flag these posts as sensitive. Here's an example of an individual weaponizing this whole thing. This is as it says, a psychotherapist. Here's what she says. Your post is the very definition of poetic license. In regard, of course, they block it off so you can't see what she's criticizing her. It says the sexual violence has been debunked. It truly has. The only sexual depravity that's been what is that? Abduced? Abduct? What is that? Let me see. That's weird. I haven't seen that. Adduced, which means cite as evidence. I've actually never heard that before. That's interesting. So the sexual violence has been debunked. The only sexual depravity that's been adduced can be found in the numerous depraved TikTok videos in the IDF post. Pretty simple. Now, you can be outraged that she says those are debunked, but that's the truth, understand? Now, by the way, on a quick side note, I think it's funny that, we should all be confident enough to acknowledge that something like that don't know, right? I'm just laughing because I already know that all our trolls are going to be like, it doesn't matter. Nobody in the world knows everything. There's plenty of things that we don't know. But anyway, the point is that to say it's not real, which by the way is backed up by all the evidence, we just went through most of it. It's easy to prove. And she says the denier of Hamas rapes, really the point is a blind believer of that, despite evidence or lack thereof. It says, I dread to think of any Israeli or Jewish woman who are survivors of sexual violence and under her care. Again, highlighting that they only care about Israeli or Jewish people. Do you not? What about Palestinians under her care? What about Germans? What about Christians? You don't care about them? I only dread to think of what will happen to Jewish people under her care. I just think that's hilarious how overtly on the surface some of these people are about only caring about one group in one circumstance. Look at what happened to the Jews on October 7th. What about the non-Jews? Don't you care about them? That there were non-Jews there? I just think that's almost too obvious. In any case, that's not the point. Her racism, barely concealed, or right on the surface, not the point. It says, this is scary. Is Tamara Abood, her name, on the governing board of the BACP, as she claims to be? Which I don't even know if she claims that. The point is that it's not. The point is this person goes on. This psychotherapist from London whitewashes a prescribed terrorist group. Well, what she says is Hamas was born of resistance and armed resistance is legitimate, which is true. They just can't handle these basic, static, objective realities. By the way, that doesn't say that all of Hamas is okay and everything they did is okay. It simply is acknowledging the yes, it was born of resistance. And second point, armed resistance is legitimate. Those are two separate things. But this infant can't seem to wrap his mind around that. That's how this works. It's all about the screaming and flailing about you're racist and you can't believe you disregard what my entire identity is based around. Except what she's saying is provable and exactly right. It's just hilarious to me. And says, I keep thinking that things can't get any more shocking, and then they do. Oh my God, pearl clutching about the facts that we can all prove. She also is a gross anti-Semite, she says. Why? Because she simply highlights a donut with a Star of David, which, by the way, is not a Jewish thing. That is a State of Israel Zionism thing that they've conflated with those things. Now, there is overlap, of course, but the Star of David and the flag and the representation that it's become, that is a State of Israel thing. What it says is, ladies who will love humanity, who don't love their love handles, I've got the weight loss tool for you, a donut you wouldn't want to eat. And they love to try to make, look, it certainly could be that she hates Jewish people. The truth is, every example they continue to show is people highlighting the State of Israel as a problem. And everyone in the world seems to be pretty hip on the idea right now that the Zionist State of Israel is a problem. Not because of Jews, not because of the Israelis that are there, but because of the Zionist government and what they're doing around the world. Same argument about the U.S. government. Same argument. But she can't help herself. She hates Jews, see? And that's why we know. And then, of course, she tags her company. And this is my point about where this is going. And apparently, in tagging her, she went on bottom line, fire her because she hates Jewish people. She implied Jews control the media. What? I mean, these people this is the kind of, everyone gets a trophy even if they lose kind of person, right? And that's not even about a woke point. It's these people that are so desperately, everything they are is kind of built into these propaganda narratives and their identity around what is a false concept. How dare you imply the thing which she didn't even imply? And by the way, okay, I go off forever. The point simply is, I've just submitted a complaint to the BAP about rape denying Tamar Abood. I hope prompt action can be taken. These people are just, these are Karens, right? That's the best. That's the COVID time frame. Karen, that's what she is. But they respond. And it says, we wanted to clarify that she is not on the board of the governors and also let you know that we have a professional conduct process for complaints about our members. So basically saying, take a hike, go over there and do the right thing. Don't just tag on Twitter and act like that's going to do something. It says, there's more information here. Feel free to actually file a complaint. And what's funny is she goes, "Thank you for confirming I've submitted a complaint." It's just, I swear to God, we've all met people like this. I know it. I'm right. I did the right thing and you're wrong because I said so, because I know it. You could see it all over her. It's hilarious to me. The point is, they're just like, go file a complaint if you want to file a complaint. Probably not taking it too seriously because a lot of people are beginning to see how stupid this kind of stuff is. And again, going back to the main point, which is that what she said is perfectly correct. As Karen melts down about what's going on. Here is Gen X girl highlighting again about the point was about the rape. That's what she's claiming. She's denying. We're still on that thread. Here is Gen X girl highlighting another. I think we've actually played a section of this already, but here's another example of the Hannibal Directive overlap atrocity propaganda breakdown. Al Jazeera proving that most of these horrific stories were in fact false, which we already know, but this is a good breakdown of 3 minutes.
October 7, 2023. 1,200 Hamas gunmen pour through the barrier separating the Gaza Strip from Israel. They overrun army bases and kill more than 1,000 Israelis and foreign nationals.
They took dozens of children, bound them up, burned them, and executed them.
A family of 4 around the breakfast table. The father, his eye gouged out. The mother's breast cut off. The girl's foot amputated. The boy's fingers cut off.
That's important too. The highest levels of power, or perceived anyway, happily towed these lines. Everything he's saying has been proven to be false. Every one of them.
Before they were executed.
These accounts were used to justify an assault on Gaza that has killed at least 31,000 Palestinians, 13,000 of them children.
Finish them. Finish them. Don't ever forget what happened.
Al Jazeera's investigative unit has carried out a forensic analysis of the events of October 7. The I unit examined 7 hours of footage, much of it taken from the headcams of dead Hamas fighters. It reviewed the testimonies of hundreds of survivors and compiled a comprehensive list of victims. It found widespread war crimes, but discovered that many of the most horrific stories were untrue.
Misinformation has been used, and sometimes deliberate disinformation has been used by official spokespersons.
I'm sorry to be graphic here, but I can't see a baby here.
If you can activate people's sense of disgust, they're more likely to support dire retribution against Palestinians.
It reveals some of the victims were killed by Israeli forces.
This footage I find very disturbing. We don't know who those individuals are. Gunmen, civilians, or hostages.
Response to October 7 massacre.
Now, it's important to point out right there again, because this is one of these sticking points. Remember, excuse me, there was an example of the green, kind of night camera version that was shown that was it was used to say that they were something that was proven to have happened, that they did fire on these cars, admitted by, including the helicopter pilots that did it. But yes, there was also a video that looked like that was out showing them firing on them, right? That was true. That was proven. That happened. Now, I don't know who actually started it, but somebody ended up sharing a video that was actually in a different location, because you'll find those videos, the same camera. They've been doing this for 75 years. And it was a different location, which then got used to claim that none of that happened. See, here's proof that they never shot these people. That's not true. That's proof that that one video was a mistaken for the other thing that we did prove. And again, has been 1,000 different ways. And the one you see in this video, that is true. That is examples of, as you can see, that is the whole, the dirt area they were running on from the festival. That's what you're looking at right there.
Gunmen, civilians, or hostages.
Response to October 7 massacre is a total destruction. A total destruction to the last one of the Hamas.
Killing, slaughtering, women, children, babies, rapes, beheading. We're gonna wipe them off the map, wipe them off the face of the earth.
This wasn't just rape. This was flat out torture.
I don't think there's any way Israel can be expected to coexist or find some diplomatic off-ramp with these savages.
First thing I said to Netanyahu when this happened was finish them. Finish them. Don't ever forget what happened.
Sexual violence and other forms of violence are being weaponized to dehumanize an enemy. And dehumanization is important in conflict. Why? Because dehumanization lowers the threshold by which you will willingly agree to attack or harm another group of people. And how do you do that? Well, you see them as subhuman.
More than 70% of those who've died have been women and children. 70%. And we know more than 160 women a day have to give birth without adequate medical protection at all, cesareans without any sort of anesthetic. It's absolutely barbarous.
And it goes on. We've shown you countless examples of this stuff. Now, here's the article I mentioned earlier. November 17th, right? 2023. This is early into this. Israel's ludicrous propaganda wins over the only audience that counts, meaning that everybody else, everyone has seen through this. And I believe that. Why make an effort to be credible if you're going to be uncritically echoed by the White House and the Western press? Excellent point. It says on November 11th, the Arabic language Twitter account maintained by Israel's Ministry of Foreign Affairs posted a video purporting to be a selfie by a nurse in Al-Shifa hospital in Gaza. You remember this? We went over this at the time, remember? I think it was even the France 24 did a fact check on it and proved that she was lying, or that it wasn't real. It goes over this in this video, but just so you can remember, this is just them catching the Twitter account from the Arabic version of Israel, deleting it, meaning Israel as an official account posted that fake video and then deleted it, which I'm almost willing to bet you that they knew and probably even made sure that they had that fake video go out. My personal opinion. In any case, they either posted it without caring whether it was true and then deleted it, or posted it knowing it was false and deleted it when they got caught. There's only one or two ways to look at it. And here's the account. Look at it for yourself. Now, that story has roundly been shown to be false. And now we're watching them invade Al-Shifa again, even though we caught them faking things to prove what they said. And then later, when they went in, they even got debunked by the corporate media. But why this right now? What about the CNN, Fox News, all these of the world? Why can't they look back and say, wait a minute, you already lied about this. You got caught pretending there was the nurse saying Hamas was there. And then it got debunked. And that was Israel that posted that. Like, I don't know why that doesn't come up. I mean, I do, because these people aren't truly invested in doing and exposing the truth. Right now, they're invested in saving their own clout and kind of like is the juice worth the squeeze back and forth and about whether they should toe Israel's line or expose them to save their face against, in regard to you and how you see them. But they lied about that. Notably, that Hamas had taken over the hospital and were stealing fuel and morphine. It was all a lie. It was widely mocked by many, particularly Arabs, who immediately called out the fact that she was mispronouncing words. I mean, it was bad. It was poorly done, which is kind of the point of this whole article. Within a day, the tweet of the video was deleted by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. But of course, downloaded versions continue to circulate well after that, and it took months later before someone proved that it was fake. Like in the sense of that, that got mass adoption. Now it says, as Hussein Ibish, a resident scholar of the Arab Gulf States Institute, notes, Israel's propaganda has always been ham-fisted, ham-handed, and ridiculous. But during this installation of the Gaza war, it has been so pathetically bad and jumped the shark so terribly that it's going to be very difficult to restore any credibility at all with the great many of people in the US and Europe. I agree. Now, it says a few examples will suffice, but there are many. Of November 5th, Israel bombed a car traveling from South Lebanon to Beirut. The IDF told the press that it, quote, struck a vehicle in Lebanese territory that was identified as a suspicious vehicle containing several terrorists. In fact, as Human Rights Watch later established, the car was civilian, containing a grandmother, a mother, and 3 young girls. The mother was wounded. The grandmother and girls were killed. Human Rights Watch concluded that this was an apparent war crime. And the attack on a vehicle containing only fleeing civilians shows reckless disregard by the Israeli military for its obligation to distinguish between civilian and military objects, and a significant failure to take adequate safeguards to prevent civilian deaths. In other words, what they've been doing for 75 years. Israel has promised an investigation, but based on previous experience, we know it's not going to happen. On November 13th, the IDF released a video of spokesman Daniel Hagari touring, it's a new example, touring Rantissi Hospital. And we've all remembered this. He's been made one of the most cartoonish aspects of this whole thing for this one thing. Hagari kept calling attention to banal objects with the suggestion that they were evidence that the hospital housed terrorists, right? At one point, he pointed to a baby bottle. We all saw it. And he literally said, quote, "It's a baby bottle. It's a baby bottle in a basement above a World Health Organization sign," which means literally nothing unless you go, but that means that this is terrorism and they had children, or it's a building with baby bottle in it because it's a hospital. But it's meaningless unless they flavor it the way they want to. And even then, it's pretty hard to wrap your mind around. It's flimsy. Now, going forward, it says, oh, then it was right. Oh, where were we? Did I scroll down an accident? How did I miss my place? Oh, that's why. That's weird. I must have bumped that. This was highlighted. Okay, where I was here. It says, after that, then he pointed to a list on the wall, which we've all laughed about, and claimed this is a list. This is a Guardian's list where every terrorist writes his name and every terrorist has his own shift guarding people that were here. And their response, which, by the way, I never even knew they made a response to this, but apparently they actually claimed it was a translation error. I mean, really? I mean, again, this is how stupid they think we are. That you're going to pretend that, and it says, as those fluent in Arabic pointed out, guys, it was literally a calendar. Days of the week on it. That's it. And you're telling us that you can't discern days of the week? You're telling us that you accidentally mistranslated 4 extra categories that didn't even exist? I mean, that's the kind of, that's a really bad excuse. We all know that's not possible. We all know you lied about that. Because I guess you just thought we wouldn't question it? No one has in the past. A lot of people haven't. As those fluent, and it goes on to say, on November 15th, Middle East Monitor reported the Israeli army killed an elderly Palestinian after using him in a propaganda campaign promoting its safe corridor. In fact, was the opposite. They're lying about the safe corridor because they knew they were bombing civilians, and they knew because they shot this man after they did this. The IDF circulated the photo, as we all saw, the gray shirt, 70-year-old man, talking to the IDF soldiers as, quote, proof of their careful shepherding of refugees fleeing the bombardment. The photo was undermined by the fact that the Israeli snipers later shot him in the back of the head. Or I believe it was the back, in fact, but either way, it's and we've seen, I mean, there's the example of the old woman they claim they were giving water to, and they later shot her. The woman they claim they were helping, except you zoom in, you can see that her wrists were almost cut to the bone because they were bound by whatever they had on her. I mean, it's just overwhelming. And that is the kind of villainy we're talking about. Again, not just killing people, but killing them or hurting them and then pretending you're there to help them while they're laying there knowing, oh my God, this guy's probably going to kill me. But the image is used to go, look at how great we are, which means they all know what they're doing, at least in that dynamic. That makes me sick. It's provable information. And again, the safe corridor that we've got probably 15 different corporate articles going, well, they bombed that corridor. Well, they bombed the safe zone. Oh, they used the dumb bombs on the safe zone. And yet we all go, is that what's happening? Is this war crimes? Israeli officials have also falsely tried to suggest that images of Palestinian civilians that being killed are just fabricated and created by what they call Bollywood crisis actors, which I think is hilarious, seeing as how any other circumstance before this, crisis actors are fake news and misinformation and conspiracy theory, except when we're talking about Russia or Israel's talking about Palestine. Then it's all fake. Then it's all real, which, by the way, it's always real. Crisis actors and fake information has always been what they do. All they're doing now is projecting what they do onto what they're doing. But it says this claim is not just wrong, but deeply conspiratorial. It says which I disagree with even the use of that word, but it says at the level of extremists like Alex Jones, they claim in this article, who's made similar claims about mass shootings in the United States, which, by the way, there's a lot to look into in regard to Sandy Hook. We're not going to get into now, but I've never shied away from it. We've had entire conversations about it back when that was happening. Pretty much the same points. There's very clearly lies going on around that situation. You can decide what it means to you. My point in this is that I think somebody else just made this point. That if we're talking about Alex Jones and how he's been sued for millions and millions of dollars for making these claims, we're literally watching our own government and the entire Israeli government literally lie about people that have been killed, pretend that they're not actually dead, lie and obfuscate for a genocide. A little bit bigger than what happened on Sandy Hook, a little bit. And that's okay. right? I mean, I'm no fan of Alex Jones, but my God, that's pretty ridiculous, isn't it? And the biggest ongoing propaganda fiasco involves Al-Shifa Hospital, one that deeply implicates not just the Israeli government, but also the Biden administration, as everything else in this whole thing. On October 13th, the IDF released the elaborate drawing. We all saw it, purported to show the main headquarters for Hamas. The drawing showed an extensive network. It was more of a cartoon. Well-lit tunnels, large rooms with, I mean, this looked like, as it says, a villain layer. None of that was real. On Tuesday, National Security Councilman spokesman John Kirby said, I can confirm for you that we have information that Hamas and the Islamic Jihad used some hospitals in the Gaza Strip, including Al-Shifa, and tunnels underneath them to conceal and to support their military operations. So folding in Islamic Jihad. So how are we trying to pretend that these negotiations only centered around Hamas are going to solve anything? And why? I don't know there's got to be somebody else making that point. That has to be prominent. Mark my words. Here's another DeLorean for you. This is going to come to pass. Mark my words. That's going to be, it's not that, that's common sense to me. Anybody can see that it's going to become a central part if they're including them now as part of the problem. But they're making all of this up as it's already been shown to be false. And now they've already bombed and attacked Shifa like 4 times, but twice now they've fully gone in there. It says Israel took control of Al-Shifa the next day after they made that claim. That's how the U.S. government helps and allows all of this. What they found there was underwhelming, as even the Washington Post noted. The searches had uncovered the body of a captive Israeli woman in a house near the hospital, along with weapons. This is what they're claiming. On Wednesday, the IDF released photographs and videos of small caches of weapons it said belonged to Hamas. The video also showed that the hospital had a box of dates, a well-loved fruit among Arabs, and 2 copies of a Quran. It says from the Post, bottom line, none of this actually proved what they claimed. It was in the room, which, by the way, we already showed you. Right here, that's the room. There's your headquarters. No, that's just a waiting room with a couple of what looks like a couple of books and a few walkie-talkies, and I don't even see a gun. There's your headquarters. That's what they're actually claiming. That was false. Now, there's a lot more. This is a good article, by the way. I just want to give you those main examples. And the point is, all of those things have been later shown to be outrageous lies. And so outrageous, the article's headline, the point is that they know we're all going to see it. But if you're going to be uncritically supported by power structures, they simply don't care. That's one way to look at it. But it finishes by saying Israel's poor propaganda is another indication of Israeli incompetence. Yet all these failures count for little as long as Israel benefits from the soft bigotry of low expectations by its supporters, including the President of the United States. And by the way, Trump too, in case you think it's only a one-way thing. Joe Biden is clearly willing to back whatever Israel does, including indiscriminate bombing and other war crimes. The American media is also complicit. As other platforms have pointed out, CNN has a habit of airing IDF videos with false information, including the calendar fiasco. Then, when the errors are pointed out, the same videos are quietly edited to delete those falsehoods. We've already seen that happen more than once. That is, guys, that's like shockingly counter to journalistic integrity. They just don't care because they're propaganda platforms. Without an editorial note explaining what happened, just cutting it out and lying for the Israeli government. But then Israel's half-baked propaganda isn't aimed at regular people, is it? The American public is quickly souring on Israel's war. As Reuters reports, only 32%, and even then, I doubt that's accurate, of Americans support this conflict, which was down from 41% a month ago. The same poll shows almost 70% of Americans want a ceasefire. Not a pause, but an actual, full, lasting ceasefire. And yet, your government, the Israeli government, even though all the collected peoples want it, they don't care what you think. And they actively fight to keep starving children. Make sure you make sense of that. Now, we're already past 3. I was hoping to be under, but let's just to finish off. We've already gone over this a bunch, but I want to make sure you see again. This is as of today. The Guardian is writing, we are about to witness the most intense famine since World War II in Gaza. Gaza is already the most intense starvation catastrophe of recent decades. The death toll from hunger and disease may soon surpass the body count from bombs and bullets. And yet we'll go on pretending like there's not a famine, right? The Famine Review Committee reported this week that Gaza's facing imminent famine. level category 5 or level 5. I mean, that's the game they keep playing, right? There's no famine, except if there is, it's Hamas's fault. Well, you can't make both those arguments at the same time. It says the parallel report from the Famine Early Warning System, which is also one of the U.S. agencies for sounding this alarm. It says it is the clearest warning that they have given at any time in its 40-year history. We have all of these metric data points that are unprecedented. The number of children killed in a 4-year period to all combined wars compared. I mean, everything. And yet we're going to act like they're doing everything they can, more than any other army in history, to not do these things, that it's no famine at all. Again, as I've said a countless amount of times, what else are you going to do? We all see right through you. So your best effort is to just keep lying, I guess. The rule of thumb, they say, pardon me, today something bothering my throat. The rule of thumb is that catastrophe or famine, the words, they mean a daily death rate of 2 people out of 10,000 die every day from disease or hunger. 2 out of 10,000, which we're there right now. About half are children under 5. That's what that means when they say catastrophic or famine. The arithmetic is simple. For a population of 1 million, which we know it's 2.5, that's 200 deaths per day. 6,000 a month. So let's just simply double that to say just 2 million. That's 12,000 deaths, half of which will be children under 5 every month. 400 every day, half of which are children under 5 every day. That's where we are right now. That's going forward. We've already seen 1 or 2, we keep hearing them, another 25, 27, children are dying of starvation. And all they can do is continue to tell you that you're racist, that you somehow hate Jewish people because you're fighting for starving children. As we showed you before, here's Arnaud Bertrand highlighting this point from, and here's the link so you can check it out, the IPC, it's the IPC. They have now given this, it's phase 5. And that's the point, catastrophic / famine. That's the highest level. And they're telling you, more than one of the groups, so all the leading groups in the world are telling you, not that they see this because of what weird narrative we're spinning, but because they're seeing it based on the metrics and the data coming out and the people on the ground, the journalists there, the doctors reporting, the human rights groups. This is real, and they're starving to death at every level. And still, they're trying to gaslight you. As Asal Rod points out, Oxfam, Israel's blocking aid to Gaza. International Rescue Committee, Israel's blocking aid to Gaza. UN Human Rights Commissioner, Israel's restricting aid. UN Special Rapporteur for Food, Israel's starving Gaza. New York Times, why isn't more aid getting to Gaza? Should be ashamed of yourselves, but that's what New York Times, Washington Post, that's what they all do. They're leading, quote unquote, in the field of journalism because they do things like that. Of course, we know why more aid's not getting in, you absolute joke. Mohammed Shihada points out, in response to the IDF saying, yes, there's been a crisis in Gaza since Hamas started war on October 7th. Oh, is that when it started? It's pathetic. That's why Israel's Kogat has delivered 17,647 trucks of humanitarian aid and counting. Which, of course, first point is about why in the world we'd even believe that. Second point is to believe that that's why we would believe those trucks are packed full of all the food they have. But the main point to make, they literally just admitted to starving these people. You know why? That is 107 trucks a day. 107 trucks a day. If we're talking over 300 minimum food trucks, or let's say 250, 500 a day humanitarian aid trucks before October 7th. That is, and then food, they were food insecure on October 6th. And it's 107 a day, less than half. We're going to pretend that that's you doing your job. And this is my point, guys. They're not saying we're doing what we can. They're pointing in this and going, see, you're all wrong. There's no famine. We're doing our job. As they know, we at some level know that's not true. I mean, do you not think that Kogat knows, the UN knows that's not true, but they just go, you're Hamas. Shut up. Here's the IDF main account saying, this is what we've delivered. And counting. It's the UN's job to distribute. Right, but you keep shooting them when you see them because you tell us they're Hamas. So then you're stopping them from doing their job, even if they are Hamas. But if they're, either way you look at it, they're responsible. Either you're going to let them do it and then claim they stole it, even though there's no evidence for that, as we keep showing you, or you're going to shoot them, which means you're either way, the Israeli government is responsible for security around their distribution. So the Israeli government has proven that not only do they do nothing, but they actually exacerbate the problem, make it chaotic, and then fire on people. In fact, the one we saw with the Flower Massacre was made chaotic because of them firing. That's how it went down by even the corporate media breakdowns. And then that's the main point about Elon Levy, who was caught lying about this. Wherever that was. I've got it over here somewhere, I thought. Here. We'll come back to it. This is what he put out and then deleted it, where he said, let's get the record straight. IDF did not shoot the convoy. IDF did not shoot people, all of which was later admitted by them. The narrative changed. They said, well, they rushed us, and well, this. Well, that's why he deleted it. That's why he's now suspended, because he's a terrible propagandist. That's what I think anyway. But he says, but they aren't doing so properly. So now, I guess they're not saying they're stealing it. But here's the thing. If what you're saying is UNRWA is Hamas, are you saying that there's some Hamas that are doing their job? I don't understand how you keep trying to walk this line. If they are Hamas and you're telling us they're completely compromised, which I'll show you next, and they're saying top to bottom now. If they're doing it not properly, that implies that they're doing it to some degree. I mean, it's just so painful to watch them try to walk this completely. If they're either way they turn, they're contradicting something I said before. Now it says yesterday, UN orgs only distributed 71% of the aid. Guys, it's provably false. Everybody, and I don't know why I have to keep saying this, but I mean, I do because they keep lying about it, including Oxfam and UNICEF and UN and UNRWA and human rights groups and even the United States and every group around them are saying they're blocking aid. They're not letting it in. So to pretend that the UN just didn't distribute it, even though we can prove in most cases they're barely even able to do part of their job because you destroyed what they're doing, you're firing their people, and you made sure they lost all the funding and then blamed them. Like, it's just, I mean, if this was so horrific, you'd have to laugh about how dumb this is. Oh, and then all you're seeing down here is just them trying to pretend they're explaining why this all adds up. And what you're doing is admitting the trucks you delivered are not even remotely enough based on every metric. But here's the Israel account doing the same thing, citing Kogat. I think it's kind of like their scapegoat to a degree. 17,647. Okay, 107 trucks a day. That means you're admitting you're starving people. But then Tiberius comes up and makes a good point anyway. Before October 7th, Gaza relied on 500 aid trucks a day. Truth. This is 35 a day. Actually, wait a minute. Am I miscounting somehow? Yeah, I think it's 165 days it's been, and I divided that. I thought I got 107, so maybe I did it wrong. He's saying 35 days worth of aid. Wait, hold on. 107 a day. Oh, never mind. So I get what he's doing now. So he's saying they relied on 500 a day. So if you're taking that, which by the way is at the time they were still food insecure, and you do the math, that only adds up to 35 days. We're talking 5 months here. It says it's been 166 days. I did 65. There should have been 83,000 trucks. He's not wrong, guys. Now, that includes water and other things too. But the reality was, as I understand it, between 200 and 300 aid trucks of all food was necessary, and they were food insecure then. How do you misunderstand that? It says you've blocked 79% of the aid one of the poorest populations on earth relied on. And then we realize the only reason they need that aid is because you've made them refugees their entire lives by never allowing them back to their homes. And there's nowhere else they can go. In most cases in Gaza, they're not even allowed to leave. And then you blame them for being refugees. It's just so gross, this whole thing. Now, I'll include this again. All the points they keep trying to claim. And here's Elon Levy on the 14th when he still had a job, pretending that it's not getting in, it's getting around, claiming that the UN is not doing their job and hijacking the aid. Well, you just said over here that they were. You get the point. But the U.S. spoke up and said no record of Hamas seizing aid. Even the Times of Israel, what was this one? It's News Nation. Here's ABC. Here's Times of Israel. Has not provided evidence. And I have them over here as well. Israel has yet to provide evidence that they were part of October 7th. Same thing with this one. Canadian officials still haven't seen intelligence that they're linked to Hamas at all. They keep making the claim, though. Then I say down here, well, assuming the Israeli government is even letting aid through, which they're not, because they're blocking it, right? So Hamas isn't hijacking it based on every piece of evidence we have. Then you can prove, based on everybody else's points, that Israel's provably blocking it, which I shouldn't need to prove, but it's very clear in case you haven't seen it. And then let's just say, like the Flower Massacre, they're letting it through for some faux display. We know that they're shooting people. And by the way, this goes back to even before October 7th, but then right away, like October 20th, there's an early example of them shooting people. I think it's been happening the whole time. Every platform, Associated Press, NPR, they're shooting people going for aid. And then here's a fact check of Kogat, which I highly recommend you check out, proving that they're liars. Now, here's a good point that I want to kind of wrap on these last two things. It's so transparent that from every level, the IDF, the Israeli accounts, or I guess you could argue whoever's running all their Twitter accounts, but I believe these are to some level coming from the top. Here's another one. They keep doing this. You know, somebody just shared this picture like a week and a half ago going, oh, here it is, March 5th. And it's the same picture with the same guy doing the same thing. So it clearly is not, I mean, at the very least, they're reusing it if you think it is current. My point was we can prove that the entire area, including the bakery, including the refugee camp, has been mostly destroyed. That doesn't mean they haven't cobbled together some level of something, which we've seen in some cases. I just saw one the other day, but it's like that's like 5 boxes and a couple of things they have. But you can look in the background and see that as far back in the street, this is the area that was destroyed. Now, Ali points out Israel is blocking food, aid, and medicine. So one photo doesn't change that, even if it is real. Before I play that next part, here's what UNICEF was telling you. We already played this the other day.
Heading back into Gaza now. Outrageous how many life-saving supplies are so desperately close to those who need them. Food, water, medicines, life-saving supplies, because we know just across there in the border, children have died of malnutrition. Children have died of dehydration. These are the supplies that so urgently need to get across into the civilians of Gaza. And the most efficient way, the only way we are going to save the lives of the numbers of children who are so desperately in need is by these roads.
All right, so the point is simply he's standing there. He's saying these are all the trucks they're not letting in. There's not Hamas stopping them. There's not somebody hijacking them. That's Israeli inspections, which, by the way, is what they're going to be doing in the port. So the game about them moving to the port in the most simple sense to be able to get aid in is going to be the same problem because Israel's also part of the checking process, which is why this is happening. And everyone knows that. So it's all this illusion. We're all pretending like this makes sense at some level, or some people are anyway. But back to this point, which this is just responding to that same picture. Here's somebody, and this what kind of got me going on this earlier, who posted something that got deleted underneath this image. You remember what this was? He simply posted the image of the market from the Nazi propaganda. Didn't even say anything. Just simply said, Nazi-occupied Poland, 1941. Now, his account's gone. Thanks, Twitter. Free speech. Hooray. Why? Because he dared to highlight the fact that that's Nazi propaganda. What's the difference? You not only are you, like, even if it's a real picture, which I'm about to show you, and I already know that it's not, or at least current, that they're posting this as if that suggests that otherwise that's not happening. I mean, it's meant to downplay what is suffering that's happening. That is why he posted this, because that's the same thing that Nazi propaganda was doing. That's who they are. Now, this person, Joe, highlights something for me that I found very interesting. So I wonder if Kogat Online realizes how easy it is to check when a photo was taken. This one was taken in December 14th, or December 2014. Because if you click on the image, look in the source code, or inspect, and break it, and look down through the images, you can see created 2014. And the point overall, this has been destroyed. And numerous examples have been shown. And the bakery itself was, the point is the bakery is in this refugee camp, and this is the refugee camp that has been destroyed. And they're telling you, scenes in Nusrat, March 18th, or was it March 5th when you shared it last week? Who cares? But good on you for highlighting the fact that what we must realize is this either means the central group that's being used to gaslight about genocide is either well aware that they're lying about what they're doing and then helping people starve to death, or they just don't care to check. Pretty crazy. Now here's that group right here, saying over 500,000 boxes of baby formula entered the Gaza Strip since the start of the war. This is part of over 330,000 tons of humanitarian aid that entered Gaza for civilian population. There are no limits, they say, to the entry. We know that's not true. Which, by the way, makes you wonder, is any of this true? Any of it? At the very least, we know that there are limits. We know that they are restricting things. That's a proven fact. Even Israel's admitted that. But here, that's an argument that stemmed from Kogat and Elon Levy. Maybe, again, why he got fired, because he's making this obvious. Because the reality is that even Israel has acknowledged that we're not going to let them bring in knives or scissors or whatever else. And overall, that ends up broadening out into damn near everything. And even CNN broke it. Here's wheelchairs. Here's gauze. Now, what argument you could make for why gauze would be illegal, but they're doing it. What do you call that if not limits on the amount of aid that can come through? It's obvious what's happening. And again, here's UNICEF highlighting for you that they're literally restricting them coming in. I mean, you don't need much more to realize that. So Kogat is a lying, dishonest platform. Here's Francesca Albanese, UN Special Rapporteur, telling you the WHO says an increasing number of children in Gaza are on the brink of death due to acute hunger, with newborns dying because of low birth weight. So that means the mothers already, like these mothers aren't even able to breastfeed because they're all starving. That's been discussed openly. And that's why these children are dying. They can't get fed. Meanwhile, thousands of trucks with essential supplies have been blocked in Rafah for months. Sad. Now here, again, I was saying earlier, think about responding like this as from the Israel account. Philip Lazzarini says, and this is actually from like a week ago. It's weird that, of course, they capture it, the screen capture, because they don't want people to be able to read and respond or share it. But he says, staggering, the number of children reported killed, and he does say reported even, by the way, in just over 4 months in Gaza is higher than the number of children killed in 4 years of wars around the world combined. That is just unparalleled. It makes me sick. The war is on children, he says. This is how Israel responds from their main account on Twitter. You know what's staggering, Lazzarini? Your inability to hold Hamas responsible for what it did to children on October 7th. Yeah, who cares about 5 months of genocide? How dare you not point, even though he did, when it happened, more than once. But I guess they're outraged because he doesn't continue to only care about one event on one day while we've had, 5 months of days worth of ongoing genocide? And then he goes, Hamas murdered babies. Well, there is not actual proof of that. We have a couple of examples of children that you claim were killed that we can prove were in even area. I mean, we just went over this. One child in Kibbutz Be'eri, toddlers, children, 32 Israeli children, 9 months kidnapped. You know who that one is? That's the Bibas child that they know is dead and they keep using his memory, which is disgusting. He was killed by IDF bombings per the own father speaking up and saying that. Hamas is intentionally hiding behind civilian children. Nobody has yet proven this. And the UN and I believe human rights groups even made the argument in the beginning, it's on you to prove that. You can't just say it and go forward. You're, what's the word they used? Whatever, the responsibility's on them, and they've never done it. Showing yet again that they lack responsibility or they just simply do not care. Hamas is stealing humanitarian aid. No, again, that is, even by your own allies, has been disputed. There is no evidence that they're stealing aid. That's why I want this to be broadly seen. No record of them blocking or seizing aid. But I added this, just a reminder, and this is the discussion of Elon Levy and his lies. But this is him deleting it on February 29th, the Flower Massacre, showing you they're lying about just about every story. And on top of all of it, that they're actually, this clearly suggests that this was a deliberate act to torture, murder, make these people suffer, starve, and then come out and say, lies, we didn't do any of it. Ooh, yeah, we did, but here's the story. And don't forget, they're literally arguing at some level. This is from March 14th. Israel lobby pushes lie that people are simply not starving in Gaza. Imagine making that argument right now. Here is a person from the UK. As Tiberius says genocidal POS, David Lammy. Famine in Gaza is the consequence of war, he says. And then he responds saying, no, it's not you disgusting. It's not. You disgusting maggot of a man, he says. It's the consequences of imperialism, colonialism, ethnic cleansing, and genocide that you have openly supported.
Yesterday, a UN BAT report revealed the shocking reality that famine in Gaza is imminent. Half the population is expected to face catastrophic levels of hunger, the highest number of people ever recorded under this system. Only twice in 20 years have famine conditions been reached. But what distinguishes the horror in Gaza from what has come before is that this is not driven by drought or natural disaster. It is man-made. It is the consequences of war.
That's what he has issue with. Up until that, you could have been like, well, I agree. But just to act like it's just a byproduct of war, that's not true. It certainly can be, but that is weaponizing famine. And that's what we're talking about. This is a guy trying to walk that line we're talking about, probably in a very specific way by direction.
It is the consequence of aid that is available not reaching those who need it. Food is piled up in trucks just a few kilometers away while children in Gaza are starving. It's unbearable.
Now here is Kenneth Roth pointing out Israel is challenging investigations of UNRWA even before they're released. That's because the facts don't matter. Netanyahu wants UNRWA destroyed to further his starvation strategy in Gaza and his hopes that Palestinian refugees will forget who they are. Now, I obviously went way past 3 hours. I'm going to kind of wrap right here, guys. I'm just going to include this. You can go, I'll go over this maybe in the next couple shows, just going over this point. It's really embarrassing where they're just attacking. So basically, UNRWA has two different investigations. The UN is conducting two investigations based on flimsy allegations, but they're still doing it anyway. And they haven't even concluded, and Israel's coming over the top and saying, we don't even care what they conclude. They're all terrorists, which just shows you it never mattered about facts because there are no facts. It's just about what they're trying to accomplish. And we'll include the right of return. Both shows we discussed this to show you what this is really about. And this is the UN document that discusses why this is central to simply having conflict in the Middle East in general and the focus of the Zionist occupation and what it's done. And ever since then, denying their right to return, which is international law. And here's Arsen Artrovsky again. According to new intelligence, we now know that there's 2,135 staff members in Hamas of UNRWA. Gee, let's just make it an even 5,000. Why not, right? Let's just go to town. There's nothing to back it up. You're just saying things out loud, typing things out on Twitter. And that's what he says, Tiberius again. What an effing clown show. You just make things up every day with zero evidence and expect the world to believe it. We're excited. Crack pipe. I mean, it's bad. And I'll include these again, showing you that both the US, the UN, and Canada have said there's no evidence of that. Now, on the point, I don't want to, I wanted to take more time on this. So I'll save all these to go and do next. It's the point we already discussed, but I want to flesh it out more. It's very clear this is about, as Dan Cohen puts it, it's just simply an obvious humanitarian aid regime change plot. Truly. And this is not about occupation, as Sarah Wilkinson's pointed out. And the fact that they're building these ports with the rubble of the areas that contain Palestinians that have been killed. It's disgusting. It's horrific. And I'll leave you with this again, Torah Judaism, an Orthodox Jewish group all over the world that actively calls out Zionism. Oh, look, I'm not following them, Twitter. Oh, weird. Twitter's so obvious these days. The point, anti-Zionist Jewish children in Jerusalem demonstrated with symbolic gallows with ropes to send the message that they would rather go to the gallows and die than join Zionist occupation army. Jews continue to fight against Zionist army and Israel. Zionism is not Judaism. Israel is not a Jewish state. Now, you can disagree all you want. That's okay. The point is to recognize that there is huge, the percentage is up to you to decide. I'm beginning to think it's potentially a majority, but I know it's a gigantic group of people in Israel, in all over the world, that are Jewish groups, communities, Orthodox and otherwise, that do not believe in the state of Israel, that do not think Judaism is Zionism, and are simply expressing that. For you to call them not Jewish or some negative thing, that is the dangerous problem of Zionism. To argue that they're somehow not allowed to be Jewish unless you're a Zionist, guys, that is the problem of Zionism. And these Jews are trying to let you see that. It's important, guys, to end on this, just to be critical, to be skeptical, to be objective, to do your best to consider all possibilities while questioning all of them equally. And obviously that ends up in plenty of situations where we have to kind of come to our own conclusions, right? We have to decide what we think it means. And that would otherwise mean that we haven't proven it. And these need to be okay. There's always a flow of information. You're always going to have challenging narratives, especially today, especially as we get into the world of deep fakes and everything else coming along. We're going to get to a world, the post-truth world that they clearly have engineered so that where do you look? Well, you hopefully will look to places like this. Objective, nonpartisan, honest, in my opinion. I'm an honest person. Don't believe that blindly, but I act in ways I believe are always in the best interest of you. And my point being, that's not what corporate media is. That's not what partisan media is. That's not what mainstream alternative media is. It's just not. There's countless examples of how you can clearly see that those things will guide you in a direction, and sometimes without that even being aware. Without them even being aware of it. I'm not claiming I know that they're all dishonest. What I'm saying is that it's clear to see that partisan narratives and these kind of things will always eventually guide you in a direction that makes you compromise something. I'm pointing out every day. So hopefully we can see beyond that, and we can actually make some positive changes here, bigger than Palestine, but hopefully kind of based on this growing awareness around the real power structure of our world. And I don't even mean just Zionism. I mean the truth of how this world operates. And it is pretty dark, but it doesn't have to be. I think right now we're kind of ebbing into this, or is it, I forget, ebbing and flowing into this new phase of people kind of going, wait a minute, that's never been true. Wait a minute, these people are liars. But as I said the other day, they're right now devising ways to wrap you back into it. I'm sure the election will be rife. It always is. But just continue to stay the course and question everything and ask questions and challenge narratives and push back on authority. You always should have been. That's the smartest thing to do. So thank you for being here. If you'd like to support this platform in our effort to continue doing so, we had our Give, Send, Go, which I'll continue to include. Well, it's down in the show notes underneath the list of what you can do to support us. And that's going to be our recurring monthly, kind of trying to grow that into a larger number of recurring donations. But thank you to all of you that have supported in all the other ways on our Stripe and on the website. I want you guys to know that all of the amazing things you've sent in the mail, we are receiving them. And I know a lot of you are worried that maybe some things aren't making it to us, and maybe some of them aren't. I can't promise everything is, because who knows if even the mail is going to be manipulated. But I will tell you, we've got an overwhelming amount of donations through the mail as well. So thank you for your support. We are getting it. And in most cases, we do our best to at least eventually get back to everything that gets sent. And to this very day, we have literally everything for the most part, unless someone falls through the cracks, we respond to. And we send a handwritten letter to everybody. I don't know anybody else that does that, so I'm going to pat myself on the back for that. But it means a lot to me, personally, to know that you guys out there are giving your hard-earned dollars at a time when we've never been more insecure, us included, everybody, that you give it to, that you believe in us enough to do that. It really does fill my heart. Thank you for being here. Thank you for supporting us. As always, question everything. Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.